Chapter 1007. Why don't I find a chance to finish him off with a knife? Xiaodiao was really Xiaodiao. Xiaodiao had gone too far. Xiaoduo said with grief and indignation. If you had told me earlier, I wouldn't have gone in. I didn't want to suffer this humiliation and disappointment for no reason. Everyone was getting more and more embarrassed. They really wanted to see him make a fool of himself. Xiaodiao said. Zwa, how can you be so stupid? You contributed the most to us being able to open Zhu Wu's inheritance. Before everything is set in stone, they won't let go of you, the best tool. In fact, using your power to open the land of inheritance, while you can't get anything from the land of inheritance, is in the best interest of our Umno alliance. Zwa Xiaoduo said sadly. Really? Xiaodiao nodded. Of course. Speaking of gains, I feel that I have gained a lot and am very satisfied. But compared to them, they must have gained more than me. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense at all. Each of them should have gained much more than me. Shahan and the others looked straight at Xiaodiao. When did this guy become so wise all of a sudden? Every word was on point. But what was he trying to do by saying that? Couldn't he just keep it in his stomach and not say it out loud? Otherwise, they would just beat him to death after they went out. Hai Hunshan and the others looked at Shahan, Shaja, and Shayu speechlessly. Their eyes had the same thought. Is this the Sha family? He's really too wise. Your Sha family actually has such a wise person and a pig teammate. The future is just around the corner. This was no longer the second time. He understood everything. But he didn't understand who was inside and who was outside, who was on his side, and who was his enemy. Zwa Xiaoduo admitted that he was helping the enemy, but that was at most unintentional and passive. But Xiaodiao was blatantly speaking in favor of the enemy. Why are you all acting so weird? Why do you keep winking at me? Xiaodiao was very puzzled. Instead of thinking about those crooked ideas, let's hurry up and show the harvest. We promised Boss Zwa before that everyone would give him 1/10 of the harvest. Words are like the wind. It's too late to regret. He said with a heavy accent. I know you don't want to give it to me, but I want you to give it to me. There's no use winking at me. A promise means a promise. Everyone. Slap. Xiaoyu gave herself a hard slap. I was wrong. Why did I wink at him? Such an idiot. The way he looked at him was simply. It's my fault. It's all my fault. I was blinded by my own lard. How could a bastard like him understand winks? That not only did he not understand, but he also wanted to strip him clean. Zwa Xiaoduo's spirits were lifted when he heard this. He said, It's my bad luck that I didn't gain anything. It's fate. However, I'm very comforted that you're willing to give me 10% of your gains. I didn't help you in vain. You didn't call me boss in vain. I believe that as the direct descendant of the Wizard Alliance, you won't go back on your words in addition to the great gains you've made. For a moment, everyone was silent. They all looked at Hai Hunshan and Shahan. The two of you, who were known as the most scheming, had to come up with an idea. Zwa Xiaoduo continued. We've been through life and death together. No matter what our original positions were, we've been through life and death together. Although it's inevitable that we'll be enemies in the future, in this space, we're still brothers. As the boss, I don't want to take too much and cause more karma. I'll just take a little as a token. Then he looked at Xiaodiao and said, Xiaodiao, you can do it first. I trust you. You said that you gained the least, so you must have gained the least. You probably didn't gain much. Just give us a token later. Zwa Xiaoduo spoke quickly and clearly before Shahan and Hai Hunshan. Hai Hunshan's face suddenly changed. He hurriedly said, Xiaodiao you. Xiaodiao laughed excitedly. Zwa, you look down on me too much. I said that my gains were not as good as theirs. That's true. But the number of treasures in Zhu Wu's treasure house is not small. Open your eyes wide and take a good look. Before he finished speaking, he had already taken out his space ring proudly. With a swipe of his hand, he poured out the contents of his space ring. Poured out. Poured out. The corners of the other 8 people's mouths twitched instantly. Their faces were full of cramps. Their faces were extremely twisted and ferocious. As far as the eye could see, the ground was full of mysterious light and treasure aura. Endless spiritual aura rose densely. It was colorful and magnificent, like pearls bouncing on the ground. There were hundreds of treasures competing with each other. Obviously, Sha Diao was right. His gains were really good. The other 8 people looked at Sha Diao's face like dead fish, and then looked at the treasures on the ground. This guy, actually, really took them all out. We really don't understand. What are you showing off for? You're right. Compared to everyone else's gains, you're indeed the one with the least gains. You're very wise. You've already made the judgment. Too smart. At this moment, the 8 people all had an illusion. Was this guy pretending to be a fool? Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? He knew that he had the least gains, and was jealous of others' gains. Then he would drag everyone down with him. But after all, it was just a thought. Because this result would cause everyone to suffer heavy losses, even more than Sha Diao, but it would benefit Swordsmanship. In the end, it would harm the overall interests of the UMNO alliance. If Sha Diao really had such foresight, he would have taken this step sooner or later. Therefore, Sha Diao was still Sha Diao, and only Sha Diao. Sha Diao's face was full of pride. Obviously, he was very proud of his gains. He said, I only found these. Innate fire essence. I found a total of 250. There's also Master Zhu Wu's notes on the cultivation of the Wu people. And there are 30 frigid ice essence, 7 earth essence souls, 6 wind essence pearls, 6 gold essence pearls, 6 wood essence pearls, and 6 wood essence pearls. Only I didn't find the wood essence pearls. It's a pity that I can't gather all 5 elements. Sha Diao said, according to the agreement, I'll give Zhuo 1/10 of the gains. I won't give you the notes. So I'll use 1 earth essence soul, 1 wind essence pearl, and 1 gold essence pearl each. I'll replace them. Frigid ice essence souls, 3 for Zhuo. 25 innate fire essence pearls. Sha Diao counted seriously. He pushed all the gains to one side and finally formed a small pile. 7 earth essence souls, 6 wind essence pearls, and 6 gold essence pearls. These were less than 10. So he gave 1 to Swordsmanship. It was obvious that he wanted to make up for the missing parts of the notes. Sha Diao honestly finished the distribution and said, So Zhuo, what do you think? I, Sha Diao, am a straightforward person, but I'll definitely do what I promised you. Swordsmanship took a deep breath and praised, Sha Diao, you're really good, a real man. You're a man of your word. This really shows me the elegance of the seniors of the UMNO alliance. You're a man of your word. You can be considered a hero. Swordsmanship will remember this friendship. Swordsmanship rarely approved of someone from the bottom of his heart, but Sha Diao did it. Although what he did, in Swordsmanship's eyes, was stupid and unwise to support the enemy. If it were him, he would never do it. But this sincerity, this boldness of keeping a promise, was enough to move Swordsmanship. Because of this, Swordsmanship made up his mind. If he met this guy in the future, he would know his limits. Sha Diao's face lit up. He said, keeping a promise is the moral integrity of the ancestors of the Wu people. Even if we, the descendants of the Wu people, are unworthy, we can't disgrace our ancestors. He said righteously, I'll give you as much as I deserve. I, Sha Diao, won't do things like embezzling, stuffing my own pockets, and destroying the integrity of others. I believe that my brothers won't do it either. Swordsmanship fiercely nodded his head. That's right, the descendants of the sorcerer tribe are trustworthy. They are honest and trustworthy. They definitely won't do such shady business. On the other side, Hai Hunshan, Sha Hun, and the others couldn't wait to grab Sha Diao, skin him alive, and beat him to death. You're awesome. You talk about integrity. If we don't do it, we're not good people, right? But think about it carefully. Now that they've left Zhu Wu Zhurong's palace of inheritance, Swordsmanship is no longer Zhuo. He's an enemy. You fucking what's wrong with giving him less? If you give Swordsmanship less, will Sha Diao die? Will he? She actually dared to make fun of us again and again. Everyone knew in their hearts that Sha Diao wasn't mocking them at all. Those words were indeed what he thought in his heart. And then they came out of his mouth. Since that's what he thought, then that's what he said. But in a situation where everyone had the intention to keep the information to themselves, every word and sentence of those words became the most vicious and sharp mockery. Everyone's expressions didn't look too good. But Sha Diao didn't care about that. After he quickly assigned himself, He even considerately pushed Zhuoxiaodua's pile towards Zhuoxiaodua's side. He said considerately, Zhua, you don't have to be embarrassed. This is what you deserve. You helped us open Zhu Wu's Palace of Inheritance, so this is what you deserve. Not to mention, we've already promised you beforehand. Xiadiao said naively. I'm not afraid of offending you, Zhua. Actually, I didn't want to give it to you. But since I've already promised you, there's no turning back. I know that you must feel embarrassed now, and feel ashamed to accept it like this. But you've indeed contributed a lot, so it's reasonable for you to receive something in return. Hai Hunshan and the others rolled their eyes in unison. Embarrassed. Zhuoxiaodua would be embarrassed. Chapter 1008. How could a scumbag like Zhuoxiaodua feel embarrassed when he received your gift? The word embarrassed had probably never existed in his dictionary, since he was in elementary school. Thank you, Brother Xiadiao, for your kindness. Zhuoxiaodua said with emotion. I have to say, even if we are on different sides, I still want to be friends with you. In modern society, there are too many deceitful things. Honest people like Xiadiao who keep their promises are too rare. He sighed. Modern society has developed to the present day. Everyone is calculative and blinded by greed. The teachings of our ancestors and the fine traditions have long been lost. Today, to be able to meet someone as honest and trustworthy as Brother Xiadiao again, I feel that I am not alone in my path. I feel very happy. Zhuoxiaodua gave him a thumbs up. Good job, Xiadiao. Xiadiao's face lit up. It's nothing. We, the disciples of the Umno Alliance, are all such good men. Zhuoxiaodua nodded repeatedly with a face full of agreement. Of course. Xiadiao put away his things with a face full of pride. He looked up at Hai Hunshan and the others who were dumbfounded and asked curiously, Why are you all looking at me like that? Hurry up, I'm done. It's your turn now. Why are you all standing there like idiots? Hurry up, it's been so long. Now that we've left Zhu Wu's land of heritage, the troops chasing after Zhuo will be here soon. Why are you all dawdling? Why are you all looking at you like that? Hee, we want to eat you alive, bite by bite. Xiadiao, this name of yours is really fucking correct. Every word of Zhuoxiaodua's was a bait, leading him to say what he wanted to hear. And Xiadiao cooperated very well, not missing a single word. He really trapped all of us in there. In fact, even if we wanted to stall for time until people came, we couldn't show off any more treasures. Now because of you, if we don't take them out, we'll feel sorry for our ancestors and the Wu people. He was speechless. Sha Hun and Hai Hunshan looked at each other and saw the speechlessness in each other's eyes. A fool and a woman had dragged the two great think tanks into the ditch, unable to climb out. This was probably the case now. Hai Hunshan sighed. This time, there was no need for him to pretend. He was frowning from the bottom of his heart. From the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help but take a step forward and say, My harvest is indeed slightly more than Xiadiao's. Xiadiao said in surprise. You've got more than me. Why did you have that expression on your face just now? Really, Hai Hunshan, it's not good to be too greedy. Shouldn't you thank the heavens and your ancestors for getting these? Hai Hunshan said fiercely. Yes, that's right. So I'm thanking your 8 generations of ancestors now. Xiadiao scratched his head and murmured, Why does it sound like you're scolding me? Hai Hunshan ignored him and took out the treasures one by one. Soon there was a big pile on the ground. After the distribution, Zhuoxiaodua got 47 connate fire essences, 15 frigid ice water essences, 2 earth elemental souls, 2 gold spiritual pearls, 2 gold spiritual pearls, and 2 wood elemental spiritual pearls from Hai Hunshan. Xiadiao didn't get any of these, but there was another pile. Then it was Sha Hun's turn. Sha Hun was also very happy. His harvest was slightly less than Hai Hunshan's, but the share he gave was about the same. Then it was Kami no Su. She also looked at Xiadiao with a drooping face. She took out her share and gave Zhuoxiaodua a share. Then it was Tu Yun Xiao, Tu Yunyan, Sha Yu, Sha Zhe, and Yen Ziki. In the end, the share they gave to Zhuoxiaodua was a little more than everyone else's. Among the 9 people, except for Sand Eagle, who still looked comfortable and relaxed, the other 8 people all looked as if they had eaten shit. It was needless to say how ugly their expressions were. Thank you, everyone. I didn't expect all of you to be so honest and keep your promises. You are indeed the sons of the Wu people. Your words are like the wind, and your words carry weight. Zhuo Xiaoduo's face was full of sincerity. This guy didn't seem to have any conscience at all. At the beginning, we agreed that you would give me 1/10 of your harvest. But we didn't say how much I would give you, right? The reason why I pretended that I didn't get anything was for your sake. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable and fall sick. Hai Hunshan coughed inside. Of course. Since we agreed in advance, we won't go back on our words. We Wu people may not be as cunning as you. We humans in the Dao League. But when it comes to honesty, we are number one in the world. Of course. Zhuo Xiaoduo beamed with delight. Over there, the enormous body of Zhu Rong, ancestor of Magi, which was entirely composed of fire power, had already reached thousands of zhongs high. With an inexhaustible sense of relief and reluctance, he rose into the sky, seeming to have no attachment at all. Just as his feet left the ground, a voice rang out from behind him. Within a radius of several thousand miles, all the people of the Umno Alliance who saw this scene, no matter if they were ordinary people or warriors, all knelt down sincerely with tears in their eyes. Farewell, Master Zhu Wu. Farewell, Master Zhu Wu. The huge body finally started to move towards the sky. Shihai, Wu Du and Zhu Meng, the three senior magi, all knelt in the clouds, their eyes full of passion. Farewell, Master Zhu Rong. Behind them, Lei Changtian also bowed slightly, his face full of respect. Farewell, Zhu Wu Zhu Rong. No one could be disrespectful to this senior Zhu Wu, who had once wreaked havoc in the past and present, and left behind countless legends. The huge figure rose gradually without looking back, getting further and further away from the ground. The heat of the flaming valley, as Zhu Rong's figure left, started to spread outwards. The fire energy that was originally condensed and gathered in a certain area was about to go out of control. The sea of fire rose endlessly. The 10 people who were still in the central area were sitting quietly, waiting for the moment to go out. Hai Hunshan and the others did not speak. Their gazes were intentionally or unintentionally fixed on Zhuo Xiaoduo, their hearts full of complicated feelings. After they went out, they would immediately go back to cultivate in seclusion, hibernate, and break through again. However, although Zhuo Xiaoduo had gained a lot of benefits, it was inevitable that he would fall into the most concentrated encirclement again. There was no need to guess. Anyone could guess this result. After waiting for such a long time, it was estimated that the number of people who had the burning order outside would be at least 10,000. Even more were the number of high-level warriors from the Umno Alliance, who were waiting for Zhuo Xiaoduo outside. Even if there were not hundreds of thousands, there would be at least hundreds of thousands. There were also millions of soldiers, who had completely sealed off the path back to the astral souls. If Zhuo Xiaoduo wanted to go back alive, it was simply impossible. Yes, he was strong and tyrannical, invincible among those of the same level, and could even kill those of a higher level. But so what? As long as Zhuo Xiaoduo showed up, no one would dare to fight him head-on. Everyone who saw him would self-destruct at the first moment. If there was a comparison, it could be said that on the path back to the astral souls, Zhuo Xiaoduo would have to go through at least tens of thousands of atomic bombs before he could go back. You, Zhuo Xiaoduo, are only at the god-reigning level after all. Can you withstand it? That was absolutely impossible. No matter how talented you were, how could you survive in the face of such a sea of people who were indiscriminately self-destructing all over the world? Zhuo, take care of yourself on the way back. Hai Hunshan was silent for a long time before he sighed and said, Actually, I sincerely hope that you can go back safely. Yes, Zhuo. I have always felt that you shouldn't die from self-destruction like this. Sha Hun sighed and said, If there is a day when we meet again and become enemies, an enemy like you should be beheaded on the battlefield with real swords and spears. Zhuo Xiaoduo rolled his eyes and said, What a nice sentence you said. Thank you. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. But as they laughed and laughed, their laughter turned into sighs. Just now, they gave all the things to Zhuo Xiaoduo without hesitation, because they lamented that Zhuo Xiaoduo wouldn't live for long. looking at Zhuo Xiaoduo, who was about the same age as them, or even much younger than them, and who was about to enter the death gate again. Everyone's feelings were complicated. Why did a genius like you come to the Alliance? Such a purely suicidal behavior didn't seem like something Zhuo Xiaoduo would do. Everyone sighed and tacitly stopped talking about this matter. Zhuo Xiaoduo sighed and said, "There is still some time before this realm reconnects with the outside world. Since you called me boss, I will read your faces as a souvenir." He felt that it had been a long time since he had gained luck points. Although he still had enough luck points on hand, who would complain about having too many luck points? After getting so many treasures from these guys, it wouldn't be right if he didn't give them some benefits. Although Zhuo Xiaoduo didn't have a lot of conscience, he still had some. When the 9 of them heard this, their spirits were lifted, and they were full of interest. "I've heard about the story of Masters was divination of astral souls," Hai Hunshan said. "Since Zhuo is so interested, we naturally want to see it." Zhuo Xiaoduo smiled and nodded. Then, he focused his power on his eyes, and looked at Hai Hunshan's face. "Then let's start with you." Hai Hunshan subconsciously slapped the tip of his nose with his tongue. He was a little nervous. It was mainly because he had seen Zhuo Xiaoduo's reputation as a fortune teller many times in the information. He knew that Zhuo Xiaoduo was really skilled in this aspect. Now that it was about to happen, how could he not be nervous? "Your physiognomy." Zhuo Xiaoduo was stunned and said, "Your physiognomy? Forget it, let's start with Shahan. I wish everyone a happy Lantern Festival today. I will continue to write. Later, when my wife drives over, I will go back to my hometown for the festival." Chapter 1009. Hai Hunshan was stunned. What's wrong with my face? This isn't your true face." Zhuo Xiaoduo was speechless. "You don't even know your face. Your entire body is not how you should be. My physiognomy focuses on the person's face. How do you expect me to look? This Chan Sheng's saint robe is completely isolated from the mysteries of heaven on your body." Hai Hunshan smiled bitterly. "So that's how it is. With this Chan Sheng's saint robe on your body, very few people can see through your fate. This is actually a good thing. Furthermore, this Chan Sheng's saint robe also has the intention of protecting you." Zhuo Xiaoduo sighed softly and said, "Hai Hunshan, are you sure you have really offended that senior Chan Sheng? His so-called punishment for you is actually a form of love, and a very special kind of love." Hai Hunshan's eyes flickered and said, "I have indeed disturbed his cultivation, but he is magnanimous and has his own judgment." "I understand," Zhuo Xiaoduo said. "He must have left you some other words, right?" Hai Hunshan said, "Yes. He left some words." "What?" Hai Hunshan was silent for a long time and said, "Chan Sheng said at that time, the toad robe will protect you, and you won't turn back unless you meet the Kuan Peng. If you don't see a dragon or a phoenix in this life, you can stop fighting until you reach the heavens." Zhuo Xiaoduo coughed and thought, "This Chan Sheng's words are even more confusing than my judgment. This ability to deliberately mystify things is worth learning." Gao Zhang. The first 2 sentences were understandable, but the last 2 sentences were simply shrouded in fog, and had no beginning or end. Zhuo Xiaoduo coughed and said, "Senior Chan Sheng's judgment of Brother Hai is indeed full of goodwill. Not only would it ensure the success of half of one's life, it would also point out the way to protect one's life in times of danger. Brother Hai only needed to remember that when he reached a certain height, if he encountered a strong enemy that he could not match, he must not act rashly. He must know how to turn back and escape. Naturally, he would be able to escape. Also, there is a great opportunity in life. If you can encounter it, you can ensure that you have no worries for the rest of your life. But if you can't, when you reach a certain height, you will reach the end of your life. You can either live in seclusion for the rest of your life, or..." Zhuo Xiaoduo said, "But that should be a long time in the future. At least for the time being, you don't have to worry." Hai Hunshan smiled and said, "I feel the same way. It is vague and out of reach. It makes one unable to make sense of it. I might as well not think too much about it. If you did not mention it today, Zhuo." Zhuo Xiaoduo laughed and said, "When you really encounter it, you will naturally be enlightened. Right now, everything is just speculation. It is hard to come to a conclusion. That's true, that's true. Hai Hunshan skipped over. Next was Sha Hun. Zhou Xiaoduo looked at Sha Hun, Kami no Su, Tu Yunxiao and the rest. Finally he looked at Sha Diao. He could not help but sigh in his heart. The luck, fate, and future development of these 9 people were not weak in any aspect. Moreover, there were no signs of them dying prematurely. The only one with a slightly worse fate was Tu Yunyan. There were faint signs that she would die prematurely. As for the others, each and every one of them had the potential to soar into the sky. This is too good, isn't it? Zhou Xiaoduo was really puzzled by this result. If Sha Hun and the rest's fate were a little stronger, they would almost be able to catch up with Li Qinglong and Long Yusheng. Were the descendants of the Umno alliance all so awesome? If Sha Hun and the rest were all people with great luck, then were the other descendants of the Umno alliance the same? How many people were there with great luck like them? They were just a small group of them, right? However, Zhou Xiaoduo still said what he could. First, he talked about the past. Then, he looked forward to the future and gave a few words of advice. But just this alone was enough to make the 8 people cry out in surprise. Too accurate. I was indeed. You can even predict that I made a big mistake when I was 8 years old. That's amazing. You can also predict that I lost my yang when I was 15 years old. This. Shaja's face was red, but he still exclaimed. I only liked one person. Cough. Sha Yu's face was red. But so many years have passed. That person was just a guard. How could it be? This is not too accurate. It's like peering into the past, predicting the present, and seeing the future. That's right, that's really too amazing. After hearing this, the 8 people were all shocked by Zhou Xiaoduo. They were unable to control themselves. Sha Hun squinted, but there was also uncontrollable shock and admiration in his eyes. He said, Zhou, I'm very curious. How can a person like you, who can see through fate, put yourself in such a situation? Is it because a doctor can't treat himself, and a fortune teller can't see his own fate? This inadvertent sentence touched Zhou Xiaoduo's sore spot. He almost cried out loud. He sighed deeply and said, Do you think I want to? I was set up. What happened? Tell us quickly. Let us all be happy. The person who set me up was my father's old enemy. He was very powerful. He was the one who sent me to the Umno alliance. I'm so angry. Zhou Xiaoduo was so melancholy that his intestines were in a knot. You can't imagine the situation when he threw me here. How could such a thing happen? That person's means are really despicable, but also really powerful. Everyone was already shocked when they heard this. After thinking about it carefully, they felt that this matter was very strange. What kind of enemy would do such a thing? If they had some kind of deep-seated hatred for Zhou Xiaoduo's father, wouldn't it be easier to just kill him? Losing a beloved son was already the most painful thing in life. Why did they have to throw him to the Wu people's headquarters? People like Hai Hunshan and Sha Hun couldn't help but think deeper. Zhou Xiaoduo's strength wasn't that great compared to the high-level combatants. But his father's enemy was able to bring Zhou Xiaoduo to the Umno Alliance's territory without anyone noticing. This was a very powerful move, and they didn't know if that enemy was still in the Umno Alliance's territory. If they left after throwing Zhou Xiaoduo, then things would be fine. But if they were watching from the sidelines, then this person's strength would be unimaginable. It had to be known that at this moment, there weren't only the people in the Burning Order, many of the Umno Alliance's itinerant cultivators, a large army, and many Flying Heavens Dao integration stage, or even higher experts. Although they couldn't attack Zhou Xiaoduo, they could constantly remind everyone of Zhou Xiaoduo's current location. And with so many high-level combatants, they couldn't find that person. That person's strength must be terrifying. If they thought about it from this, then wouldn't Zhou Xiaoduo's father's strength also be very terrifying? Although Zhou Xiaoduo's background information showed that his parents were ordinary people, and he only had an elder sister with an extraordinary cultivation level. Judging from today's situation, Zhou Xiaoduo's background was probably not simple either. In the end, no matter who killed Zhou Xiaoduo, they would have made an extremely difficult and unfathomable enemy for no reason. This series of analysis was extremely terrifying. They didn't understand it, but it was still very intriguing. After thinking about it for a while, they couldn't help but shudder and sigh. That's more or less what happened. Sigh. Zhuo recounted the events with a melancholy expression. He was extremely speechless. This place. To be honest, in my original plan, I didn't plan to come here even if I was a flying heavens cultivator, let alone a flying heavens cultivator. I had to be at least a Dao integration stage cultivator before I could come here. Who would have thought that I would be thrown here when I was only a flying heavens cultivator? This is basically a trap. The 9 of them all broke out in cold sweat upon hearing this. Only a Dao integration stage cultivator would dare to come here. Your cautiousness, or rather, your love for your life, is probably unparalleled in the entire 3 continents. I really hope you can return safely. Sha Han and the others said this sincerely. Hai Hunshan said, Zhua, what do you think the future of our continent will be like? Sha Han and the others all turned to look at Hai Hunshan and pricked up their ears. The future of the continent? Zhuo was dumbstruck. What do you mean? I mean, the safety of the continent. Hai Hunshan took a deep breath. In your opinion, how many years will it take for the demons to return? Zhuo was silent for a moment before replying. I really can't tell right now. My cultivation is far from that stage. This really wasn't an excuse. Zhuo's manifestation divine ability hadn't improved at all. At the very most, he could only see 3 months of good fortune. Once he saw someone with a higher cultivation base, the benefits would be limited, and the consequences would be severe. In the end, it was all because he was too weak. Hai Hunshan sighed and said, In my opinion, that day isn't far away. Sha Han nodded silently. Speaking of this matter, everyone's faces were gloomy and their hearts were heavy. Now the 3 continents seem to be fighting each other, and the war is getting more and more intense. But in fact, the higher-ups of all 3 sides are consciously training their troops. Hai Hunshan said, This practice is nothing more than preparation for the future return of the demons. It can be seen that no side has much confidence in the future war. They can't fight against the demons with their own strength. In fact, compared to the Demon Alliance's strength now, there's no comparison at all. And there's not much time left for us to grow. Hai Hunshan sighed deeply. So from this point of view, I don't want Zhuo to die in the Alliance. Because in the future war against the demons, Zhuo's fortune-telling ability is really too useful. But now we're still in a state of life and death. We want to, but we don't have the strength. Sha Han sighed. Besides, even if the demons return, the hatred between the astral souls and the Wu people that has lasted for tens of thousands of years, how can it be resolved? Both sides have too much blood on their hands. The so-called alliance is just a thought. At this point everyone sighed. There's no need to be so pessimistic, Zhuo said. The demons also don't have 3 heads and 6 arms. They also have 1 nose and 2 eyes. Sigh. It's really hard to say. Hai Hunshan and the others shook their heads. Many demons have 3 heads and 6 arms. It's not like they don't have more. The number of eyes and noses is also not fixed. Don't be blinded by a single leaf and your thinking is fixed. Zhuo subconsciously sweated. Chapter 10:10. As they chatted, Zhu Rong's remnant soul finally disappeared completely. The ground shook slightly for a moment. Then, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the depths of the ground beneath their feet. It seemed that countless torrents were surging at an unknown depth underground. The Red Sun Mountain Range, the holy land for fire elementalists, will probably cease to exist from now on. Hai Hunshan and the others sighed heavily. The surrounding flames suddenly burst into flames. At this moment, the intensity of the fire had reached its peak. Swoosh! Wahuang's sword and Xiao flew back. Everyone's eyes widened. This is... Before they could say anything, 10 beams of light had already descended from the sky and covered 10 people. This was the end of Zhu Wu's land of inheritance. There was no time for them to ask any questions. Originally, they did not understand Wahuang's sword and Xiao and wanted to ask, but it was already too late. Everyone's hearts were instantly filled with the melancholy of their impending separation. This melancholy was very special. In the end, they had to return to being enemies. They could not live under the same sky, and would not rest until one of them was dead. However, this situation had really come to an end. Their brotherly relationship had come to an abrupt end. Zwa, take care. Take care, Zwa. We will go back into seclusion after we leave. We won't cause you any more trouble. Take care of yourself, and return to the astral souls safely. See you again. Everyone cupped their hands. If we meet on the battlefield in the future, don't show any mercy, because we won't show any mercy either. Take care. A long rainbow-like light flashed. Xiaoduo felt his body suddenly rise from the ground. He only had time to say one last parting sentence. I won't show any mercy to you either. He only had time to say this sentence before he was pulled up from the ground by a huge gravitational force. The following sentence, I hope we don't meet on the battlefield, was choked in his throat. Of course, no one else could hear it. 10 beams of light soared into the sky. The 10 of them were separated into 10 different directions. They were shot out like rockets, and no one knew where they ended up. This was Zhu Wu Zhurong's final protection for his successor. He did not want anyone to find out where his successor had gone. Outside, countless Umno Alliance warriors were kneeling on the ground, gazing at the direction where Zhu Wu Zhurong had disappeared with great reverence. Even the 3 senior magi were doing the same, with their faces covered in tears. This was Zhu Wu's charm. This was the charm of a true expert. During this period of time, Zhurong's display of power and might is where we are heading. Although we didn't obtain anything, we were able to see the true path ahead of us, the strength that we should possess. Seeing the 10 beams of light soar into the sky, the 3 grand shamans and ancestor devil flew up together. Zwa Xiaoduo was within the 10 beams of light. But which one of them was him? Lei Changtian saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better. Naturally, he was secretly delighted. However, just as he relaxed a little, he immediately became anxious again. In this beam of light controlled by Zhu Wu himself, even he had no way of detecting his grandson's life force. In other words, he had no idea which one was Zwa Xiaoduo, and he had no way of tracking him. This time, he had really lost contact with them. If he chased after any one of them, wouldn't he only have a 1/10 chance? Lei Changtian's whole body turned cold. This random teleportation, where did it send my grandson to? The 10 beams of light flashed in the sky and disappeared without a trace. It would be fine if they were teleported to somewhere close to the Sun-Moon Pass. But if they were directly teleported to the back of the Umno Alliance's mainland, then they would really be done for. Whoa, I was wrong. Lei Changtian was dumbfounded. The beam of light's teleportation speed was too fast. He couldn't even catch up with it. He didn't even have a 1/10 chance. On the other side, the Grand Shaman of the West Sea took out his phone and began to issue orders. Attention, there are 10 directions. 3 in the east, 3 in the northeast, 3 in the northwest, 1 in the south, 2 in the west, and 1 in the north. Looking at this speed and Zhu Wu's power, they are about 20,000 miles away from the Red Sun Mountain Range. Search within the local area immediately. The 9 Wu people's disciples, once you find them, immediately escort them back to the main family to cultivate in seclusion, without any delay. If you find Zwa Xiaoduo, immediately report to the higher-ups and inform me. Do not act rashly and alert the enemy. Yes. Orders were issued one after another in an orderly manner. This order caused the entire Umno Alliance's mainland to be shaken. The subordinates followed suit and acted immediately. As the beam of light gradually disappeared into the distance, the countless volcanoes in the Red Sun Mountain Range below erupted simultaneously. A huge amount of magma soared into the sky. Within a radius of several thousand miles, the magma covered the sky and the earth. Thick smoke billowed and covered the entire sky. The 99 volcanoes in this realm spewed magma at the same time. Clouds gathered in the sky, and a torrential rain poured down. This was the eruption of the Umno Alliance's mainland. Using this method to send off Zhu Wu Zhurong, who had wreaked havoc in the world for God knows how many years. At the last moment of Zhu Wu's departure, The dojo released all the fire energy in this realm in one go. From then on, no one would be able to obtain any more fire energy in this realm. Zuwu's departure was accompanied by a torrential downpour. It was as if the souls of the past and present were crying for him. A legend of a generation, had finally come to an end today. There was no trace of him left behind. An indescribable sense of sorrow filled the entire sky. It filled the hearts of everyone in the Umno Alliance's mainland. Many ordinary people and warriors in faraway places didn't know the reason, or what had happened. However, they felt an indescribable sadness in their hearts. They wanted to cry for some reason. Inexplicably, tears flowed down their faces. The ancestor god who had fought for the Wu people his entire life. Today, even the remnant of his soul after the battle would completely leave. From now on, he would no longer protect this place. He left in a relaxed and resolute manner. I, Zhu Rong, will only fight in this life. I won't ask for an afterlife. A vigorous life was enough. That at the peak of the Umno Alliance's flood palace, a figure flashed. The flood witch, who was in seclusion, appeared at the peak of the mountain. She stood there with a solemn expression. Facing the other side of the mountain, she bowed slightly. Lord, take care. From here, she couldn't even see the thick smoke that covered thousands of miles. She couldn't even see the clouds. However, the flood witch knew what had happened. She knew that Zhu Wu, who she had always respected, had left. There was no trace of him left in this world. Although Flood Magus had been cultivating himself with the cultivation method of Gong Gong Ancestor Magus, the fighting method he used was the fighting method of Zhu Rong Ancestor Magus. In particular, the invincible Thousand Soul Nightmare Hammer was an extreme move derived from the fighting style of Zhu Rong Ancestor of Sorcery. The flood which stood on the peak of the mountain. She sensed the indescribable aura between heaven and earth. She sensed Zhu Rong's earth-shattering departure. She had an indescribable feeling that kept attacking her soul. She felt that the sea of fortune she created was suddenly overflowing at this moment for some reason. It even surged crazily. It overflowed and kept rushing in. In an instant, the flood witch felt that she was about to explode. However, a little light suddenly rushed into her mind. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. Then, she saw clouds rushing over from all directions like a gust of wind and lightning. One breath. It was just a single breath. But all of the spiritual energy, within a radius of 3,000 kilometers, was sucked dry in one breath. The flood witch straightened her body. Her messy hair fluttered in the wind. Golden light flashed in her eyes. She put her hands behind her back. Suddenly, she raised one hand and said softly, "Slash." A muffled voice suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. It sounded like a response. Slash. The voice of this single word seemed to have resounded from ancient times until now. And it had never stopped. All the Daos in the world, and all the souls in the past and present shouted at the same time. It was deafening. Suddenly, the sky dimmed for a moment. A strong sense of expectation filled the sky above the mountains and rivers of the Umno Alliance. The flood witch straightened her body and revealed a faint smile on her face. From her body, a figure suddenly flashed out and stood in front of the flood witch. It was actually another the flood witch. She also had messy hair and a burly figure. She was wearing a green linen robe. Naturally, she revealed a domineering aura that looked down on everything and looked down on the past and present. The two flood witches looked at each other. The flood witch's face was full of warmth and joy. It's been a long time. The flood witch who suddenly appeared responded with a smile. Fellow Taoist, it's been a long time. The flood witch nodded faintly. Fellow Taoist, please wait for a moment. I'm looking forward to seeing your great power. The flood witch who suddenly appeared waited cheerfully. The flood witch stood in the middle of the strong wind high in the sky. Her clothes and hair fluttered wildly. Suddenly, she took another breath and shouted in a deep voice again. Kill. This time he didn't stop. Instead, he continued to shout out the words. Fight. Heaven and earth rumbled again. Endless wind, clouds, and thunder gathered above her head and slowly rotated. A huge disk seemed to appear in the sky. It was completely composed of thunder and lightning. It rotated slowly in the air, faster and faster. In a flash, 2 more figures flashed out of the Flood Witch's body like the Flood Witch who suddenly appeared. They also laughed loudly and were full of joy. Fellow Taoist, it's been a long time. Fellow Taoist, it's been a long time. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect that I would finally succeed today and be able to stand in this world. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Flood. The 3 of them cupped their hands together and congratulated the great Flood Witch with sincere words. Congratulations to the 3 of you. Congratulations to the 3 of you. The Flood Witch's original body also smiled. Her face became more and more rosy, and the aura on her body became more and more peerless. At this moment, even the heavens and earth would take a detour when they saw her and temporarily avoid her. He stood with his hands behind his back and said softly with some emotion, "Thank you, Heavenly Tao. From today onwards, the Wu people finally have the power to fight. We have a trace of power to compete with the demon race. Although it's not much, it's still there. The heavens didn't abandon me. The heavens didn't abandon the Wu people. Thank you." The Flood Witch cupped her hands towards the sky and bowed sincerely. Thank you. In the sky, muffled thunder sounded, as if it was responding. Please help me again. The Flood Witch cupped her hands. My hammer has yet to appear for the 3 of you. Chapter 10:11. In the sky, the huge disk formed by the lightning bolts spun violently, making muffled thunder sounds as if it was saying something. The Flood Witch laughed loudly. Suddenly, she raised her hand and threw the 2,000 soul nightmare hammers, which were famous in the 3 continents and had never been defeated, into the sky and into the disk. She yelled, "Wu people Changtian, give me a hand. The 1,000 soul hammers appear in this world." She sank her chi into her dantian and sensed the power of providence that was still rushing toward her. Then she yelled in a deep voice, "Hammers!" Then a muffled boom sounded. The disk in the sky crackled violently, and a 300-meter thick lightning bolt suddenly fell from the sky and covered the Flood Witch's entire body. Then, 2 phantoms of the 1,000 soul nightmare hammers appeared. Then 2 more phantoms appeared, and 2 more phantoms appeared. Ha! The Flood Witch's original body couldn't help but widen her eyes. Even though she was in the most magical moment of the connection between heaven and man, the Flood Witch was still shocked. This is not right. I have my original hammers, and now I have 3 more incarnations. 6 more hammers will be enough. Including my original 1,000 soul nightmare hammers, I have 8,000 soul nightmare hammers in total. What a simple number. But now, how come there are 4 phantoms of hammers? Including my original hammers, there are 5 of them. There is an extra pair. Heavens, did you make a mistake? The 1,000 soul nightmare hammers were still spinning in the middle of the lightning pool, and the phantoms of the 8 hammers were being forged in the lightning pool and gradually taking shape. Just as the Flood Witch's face was filled with confusion, the last 2 shadows of the sledgehammers that were not part of the plan also took shape. However, unlike the other 6 sledgehammers, they didn't stay in the same place. Instead, they got out of the lightning pillar and turned into flowing light in the sky. They sped into the sky and flew away. The Flood Witch's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What the fuck? These extra hammers aren't under my control? Where are you going? The shadows of the 2 sledgehammers really disappeared in a flash. Not only was the Flood Witch confused, but her 3 doppelgangers were also confused and in disbelief. This was simply inconceivable. Fellow Taoist, you can actually make a mistake in the process of severing the corpse? What the hell is going on? Could it be that Taoist Brother Flood's true self is actually illiterate? There are 4 of us, for pairs of sledgehammers, 1 pair for each of us. 8 sledgehammers are perfectly balanced. Why did you have to create a 5th pair? And then let the 5th pair fly away? What kind of explanation was that? What was going on? What's more, the pair that flew away, who exactly were they prepared for? The first doppelganger of the Flood Witch had already opened its hand and stretched out its arm, ready to welcome the arrival of its life companion weapon. But the 2 hammers didn't even pay attention to it, and directly flew away. This doppelganger of the Flood Witch, who had stretched out his 2 arms, suddenly froze on the spot, not knowing what to do next. What happened to the boss? My sledgehammers. Why did they fly away? When the 4 doppelgangers of the flood, which were all confused and in disbelief, the shadows of the other 3 pairs of sledgehammers almost got rid of the thunder and lightning one after another, rotating violently in the sky. Then they fell down, and when they fell into the hands of the 3 doppelgangers, they had already become real. 3 pairs of murderous weapons, which were almost the size of a water tank, appeared all of a sudden. It was inevitable that many things would happen in the world. The thunder and lightning in the sky continued to roar, until the original body of the 1,000 Souls nightmare hammer finally fell down, like a feather, and fell into the hands of the flood witch. The huge thunder disk in the sky started to slow down from its violent rotation, as if it had used up all its energy, and started to recuperate. The flood witch couldn't bear it anymore. She frowned and looked at the sky, saying, "I only have 3 doppelgangers. What's the reason for the first pair of hammers? Why did they fly away?" Hearing this question, the lightning disk's rotation immediately paused. Then, the flood witch seemed to have heard something. She frowned and said, "How is this possible?" But the thunder disk had completely stopped rotating and turned into a dark cloud that covered tens of millions of miles. With a muffled sound of thunder, the entire Umno Alliance, from the south to the north, from the east to the west, started to rain heavily at the same time. In some of the colder regions, huge snowflakes floated down like woolen blankets. All the people of the Umno Alliance, no matter if they were ordinary people or warriors, felt clear-headed and clear at this moment, as if they had understood something. They felt that the road ahead was bright and clear, and there was no obstacle in their way. Those who had injuries, whether it was obvious or hidden, were all healed unknowingly. Those who had illnesses also felt a lot lighter. Many warriors even felt that their bottlenecks had loosened at this moment. Some even broke through directly and advanced to the next level, but they were still in a daze. There were also many geniuses who had suppressed the agitation of their real essence many times. They originally could not suppress their real essence anymore, but now they found that their dantian, which seemed to be full and could not be compressed anymore, had a capacity again. At least they could suppress their real essence once more, or even twice more. Many high-level cultivators who had reached the end of their lives and had signed the burning order actually felt that their lives had been extended at this moment. Maybe they could fight for a bit more, and with the increase in their lifespan, they could go one step further. That the entire Umno Alliance suddenly fell into a state of thunderous cheers at this moment. It shook the entire Umno Alliance for tens of millions of miles. The flood witch stood on top of the mountain and suddenly laughed bitterly. "Is it that little guy who came?" The Umno Alliance changed overnight, and the root of it was actually him, the one with great luck. Before she finished speaking, the flood witch stared at the heavy rain. The entire Umno Alliance was filled with vitality because of this. Above the clouds, something seemed to flash past. The flood witch suddenly stood up and shouted, "Since you passed by me, why didn't you leave some gifts for me?" When he landed again, there was a huge water ball in his hand. The water ball was as big as 4 or 5 basketballs. It was extremely clear, shining in his hand. Ninth Heaven Spirit Spring. When the Umno Alliance's land was filled with vitality, the Ninth Heaven Spirit Spring, as an innate spirit object, instinctively came to collect some vitality to promote its own evolution. However, the flood witch discovered it as soon as it came. Although it tried to escape, the flood witch still took away nearly 1,000 pounds of it. This was not a simple case of stealing a chicken without giving up the rice. It was an extremely huge amount. Before this, all the Ninth Heaven Spirit Spring in the 3 continents for millions of years, added up together, was not enough for this amount. However, the flood witch at this moment intercepted it with a stretch of her hand. No wonder there were so many geniuses in the past. It turns out that when one's cultivation reached a certain level, even an innate spirit object like the Ninth Heaven Spirit Spring could be obtained so easily. Before this, I was still too weak. It was a sin to not have enough strength. The flood witch put away the Ninth Heaven Spirit Spring and then laughed loudly. Today I, the flood, finally have a glimpse of the great Tao. Congratulations, fellow cultivator. The 3 doppelgangers of the flood witch congratulated at the same time. One of them said, "Deity, I'm afraid that our 3 doppelgangers are not part of the 3 corpses? May I ask, how did you split us? Why are we like your replicas? It's really different from the legend of cutting the 3 corpses to prove the Tao. The Flood Witch laughed loudly. Of course it's different. I'm not cutting the 3 corpses to prove the Tao. He raised his head and laughed. I, the Flood, have a clear conscience in all my life. There is no good or evil in me. I only have a heart for battle, a soul for slaughter. I only have one great Tao, and that is fighting. Only fighting. Fighting for a lifetime. Fearless. The 3 Flood clapped their hands and laughed at the same time. Well said, well said. You've won my heart. In that case, my name will be Hongzhan, said the Flood Water, who was the first to be materialized by the doppelganger. The second doppelganger said, Okay, then my name is Hong Sha. Well, the Sha in kill is a bit too fierce. Let's call me Hong Sha. In that case, my name is Hongzhan. The 3 of them laughed loudly. From now on, I'll work with all of you to protect the Wu people with all my blood. The Flood Witch bowed solemnly. From now on, life and death will only depend on fighting. Everyone, I, the Flood, thank you in advance. I'm just being polite. That's how it should be. The 3 of them laughed. The Flood Witch looked up to the sky and roared. The 3 of them also laughed. Their figures flashed and returned to the body of the Flood, becoming one again. Traceless and traceless. After all, the doppelganger had just been created. It still needed a long time to get used to it. Then it could be said that they could cultivate and do their own things. The Flood Witch stood on top of the mountain and looked into the distance. She murmured, Zwa, you have to be faster. Then she turned her head and looked in the direction where the 2 hammers flew. She frowned and whispered, Why is that little guy here? He wanted to go and take a look, but after thinking about it, he held back. I'm not going. I'll take responsibility for my own life. Kid, don't die. When the Umno Alliance changed, the Tao League and the Astral Souls also sensed it clearly. Because of the heavy rain, the Umno Alliance's army retreated, which was rare. Everyone in the Umno Alliance felt the infusion of life energy. At this time, none of the Umno Alliance's commanders urged their soldiers to fight with their lives. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could they waste it? The Tao League and the Astral Souls that bordered each other also had different weather changes. Originally, the Tao League's territory was sunny, but now it was cloudless. Chapter 10-12. The Astral Souls continent was in a rainy season. However, when the Umno Alliance's continent fell into a torrential downpour, the Astral Souls continent stopped all of a sudden. Then, the rain stopped and the clouds dispersed, and the sky became clear again. The Astral Souls continent was in a rainy season. However, when the Umno Alliance's continent fell into a torrential downpour, the Astral Souls continent stopped all of a sudden. Then, the rain stopped and the clouds dispersed, and the sky became clear again. The sun was shining at an unprecedented intensity. The change was very obvious. It was so obvious that the heavenly kings of the Tao League, who were supervising the battle at the front line, could clearly feel the resentment of the heavens. It seemed to be complaining about something. So disappointing. So disappointing. Look at him. And then look at you guys. It was the kind of sour feeling that other people's children had not disappointed them. Although it wasn't expressed in words, it was already on the surface that they really didn't understand what was going on. Why did the heavens and earth move, and the universe lose its color? On the other side, far away, Yu Xingchen stood up in front of the secret chamber. He felt the vibration in his godly soul inside. He broke through again. He truly stepped onto the path of Tao that no one has ever stepped onto for so many years. Looking at his own hands, Yu Xingchen's heart became more and more gloomy. That path of Tao was something that he probably wouldn't be able to step onto for the rest of his life. Ever since his wife died in the battle, and the explosion that shocked the entire Sun Moon Fortress reached his ears, his life was no longer complete. He didn't have the chance to be complete anymore. Oldzwa, from now on, it's all up to you. Yu Xingchen, the star-plucking monarch, looked expectantly at the secluded cultivation room. Ever since his wife died, Yu Xingchen didn't want to live anymore. His life was no longer complete. The birds that used to fly together were now alone. No matter how long his life was, what was the point? Back then, the woman whose life was intertwined with his was no longer there. Even if I have earth-shattering achievements, what's the use? Who am I going to show off to? Who would be glorified by this? Just to kill people? Just for the reverence of others? No. My achievements have always been for the sake of the person I love. I roam the pugilistic world. I battle the heavens and the earth. I advance bravely. My name shakes the entire continent. I went through fire and water. I fought hundreds of battles. I broke through to the heavenly king stage. I became an imperial emperor, that I only did it for the pride in your eyes. You're proud. This is your man. Now the arrogance in his eyes was gone. It no longer existed. Then even if I become a saint, I won't have a pair of white hands holding a cup of fragrant tea and whispering to me in a soft voice. You're amazing. You've worked hard. There was nothing left. All of his efforts were meaningless. I still exist now for the sake of the future of the astral souls, but for myself, I no longer want a future, and I no longer look forward to it. After the battle, he was no longer in a hurry to go home. After the battle of life and death, when I was covered in wounds, no one would bandage my wounds with heartache. I no longer have a person who can let me release my weakness in front of her. My exhaustion. In the vast world, I'm the only one left. I'm only waiting. When one day that when you meet an enemy you can't fight against, when you can't fight against them, you will turn your own life into fireworks, just like you did back then. Yu Xingchen smiled bitterly. He felt the shocking aura of his old enemy in the distance. He felt the intense shock in his soul, but his heart was still calm, without joy or sorrow. He took out a bottle of wine from his ring, opened the bottle cap, and drank 2 mouthfuls. The wine flowed down the corner of his mouth, and a nostalgic smile appeared on his face. Wait for me. Oldswa, good luck. That in the secret chamber. The endless smoke, the countless merging. Originally, there were still countless figures moving about, but for some reason, the process suddenly sped up. Almost all of them had disappeared, and now it was finally coming to an end. Zhua Chonglu and Wu Yuding didn't choose to keep their appearances before they transformed. Instead, they kept their appearances when they transformed into the mortal world. This was necessary, because the two of them were worried that their son and daughter would feel unfamiliar after seeing them. Therefore, they abandoned their past appearances. No matter how beautiful they were, no matter how peerless they were, they couldn't compare to the familiar image of their parents in their children's eyes. The two of them sat peacefully, not stagnant in the world. Around them, there were still wisps of fog circling, spiraling, and merging into their bodies. That was the aura of their souls, making the final integration. At this most critical moment, the two of them both felt the vibration of the heavenly Tao's soul. The two of them instinctively opened their eyes, feeling the aftershocks of the great Tao. The flood has broken through. Zhua Chonglu took a light breath. He has embarked on the final path. The flood which is worthy of being a hero of a generation. In this life, he should be invincible in this world. Wu Yuding also sighed and said with some admiration, after embarking on the path of the great Tao, he is actually willing to share this kind of fluctuation of the heavenly Tao with his opponent. Just this magnanimity alone makes me ashamed of my inferiority. Indeed, the flood which is a rare opponent, a rare enemy, Zhua Chonglu said matter-of-factly. But don't forget, he has another identity. He is our relative. He should do this. That. Wu Yuding rolled her eyes. Hurry up. Let's finish the last bit of integration and get out quickly. Our son and daughter must be waiting anxiously. The agreed time should be almost over. Zhua Chonglu wanted to say, it's already over. But after thinking about it, he didn't say anything. He nodded and said, okay, after the integration, I will also give the flood a shock. It's only right to reciprocate. You are still half a step away. Wu Yuding ruthlessly exposed her husband's pretentiousness. Originally, you were neck and neck, but the flood took another step and is still ahead of you. But just now, for some reason, endless power of providence suddenly surged in. It's enough to make up for it. Zhua Chonglu was complacent. Besides, originally, there was a lot of difference. Now that I am only half a step away, it's also an achievement. Well, half a step ahead of me, one step ahead of you. Wu Yuding closed her eyes. Just you wait. Wait. I will wait. I have a son, a daughter, a son-in-law, and a daughter-in-law. Am I afraid of you? Zhuo Chonglu snorted and closed his eyes. But in the end, he still felt a little guilty. He secretly opened a crack and took a few more glances before closing his eyes and peacefully going into seclusion. Thinking of his son and daughter, Zhuo Chonglu subconsciously revealed a warm smile at the corner of his mouth. It had been a long time since he beat that kid that he didn't know if he wanted to beat him up even more now. Nian Nian is probably crying when she misses us now. Her eyes are red. That girl just loves to cry. No matter how high her cultivation is, it's useless. She will probably be like this for the rest of her life. Sigh. I should hurry up and finish my seclusion and send a message to the two of them. We are just sitting here and can't move. We are also anxious. At about the same time, Li Chenglong was also frantically looking for Zhuo Xiaoduo. Originally, it was still the holidays, and Zhuo Xiaoduo's disappearance should have been confirmed a few days or even more later. But unfortunately, something happened. As expected, something happened on Xiang Chong's side. Well, to be more precise, something happened to Zhang Xuejuan's Zhan family. After the Chinese New Year, as the new son-in-law who was already engaged, Xiang Chong naturally had to make a trip to Zhang Xuejuan's house. Li Chenglong had always kept Zhuo Xiaoduo's words in mind. He knew that Zhang Xuejuan could be in trouble at any time, so he shamelessly brought Xiang Bing and followed his brother-in-law to his in-law's house. After going to the Zhan family, they were naturally treated well. After staying like this for a few days, they returned to Qianlong together. Nothing happened, so Li Chenglong heaved a sigh of relief. On the way back, Li Chenglong received a call from Yi Changqing, asking him to immediately go and check on Meng Zhongjun and the others who had gone out to train. There was no news from them until now, and they didn't even return home for the Chinese New Year. When Li Chenglong saw that they were about to arrive at Fenghai City, he finally put his heart, that had been hanging in the air for a few days, back into his stomach. After bidding farewell to Zhang Xuejuan and Xiang Chong, he brought Xiang Bing and went to the training ground where Meng Zhongjun and the others were at. However, not long after Li Chenglong left, Zhang Xuejuan received a call from home, saying that there was great news and asking her to return quickly. The meaning was that there was great news about the bloodline of the Zhan family. Zhang Xuejuan naturally didn't say anything and immediately returned. Xiang Chong naturally followed his sweetheart. The so-called great news was related to a celestial fate. Back then, the ancestors of the Zhan family had formed a connection and received a stick of incense left behind by a celestial. It had been enshrined in the Zhan family's ancestral hall since then. The celestial who gave the incense had said that if the incense burned spontaneously, it would be an opportunity. At this time, all the descendants of the Zhan family had to join in the incense and pray. Then, they would use the power of their bloodline to inject a jade pendant that was left behind together. At this moment, whoever the jade pendant lit up in their hands would be bound by the celestial fate. At that time, a great opportunity would naturally befall them. Not long after Li Chenglong and the others left, a strange fragrance that had been silent in the Zhan family for a long time suddenly rose. It was really strange, and the fragrance spread far and wide. At first, everyone was surprised by the sudden appearance of the strange fragrance and didn't think about the incense in the ancestral hall. After all, this matter had happened too long ago. In fact, most of the Zhan family members didn't even know about this past. When they found the source of the strange fragrance, the elders of the Zhan family, who knew about it, became excited. Then, they naturally gathered all the descendants of the Zhan family, who were not at home, and hurried back home. This involved an extraordinary celestial fate. How small could it be? Zhang Xuejuan, who had just left, naturally received this news. As the number one genius in the family, she was naturally summoned back immediately. Chapter 10:13. Don't worry. Zhang Xuejuan smiled. Look at me. What kind of a mortal would fancy me? Xiang Chong only felt that the crisis in his heart was getting heavier and heavier. Looking at Zhang Xuejuan in front of him, he felt as if he was in a dream, or in a misty cloud. That kind of misty, illusory and unreal. It seemed that at any time, she would be blown away by the wind and turn into a cloud. But this woman was clearly his fiancée, the person he loved deeply. Xiang Chong forced a smile and said, "But Zhua said that you don't have to do anything except practice. There may be many opportunities, but they may not be opportunities." Don't worry. How could such a big raindrop fall on my head?" Zhang Xuejuan smiled. She kissed Xiang Chong lightly on his face and comforted him. "When this is over, we will immediately return to Fenghai. It won't take long, at most half an hour. I'll be back in no time," she said as if she was comforting a child. "Don't worry. Be obedient and wait for me here." At this point, what else could Xiang Chong do? He could only agree. "Okay, then you must be careful. If you find anything wrong, come back quickly." "Okay." Zhang Xuejuan felt Xiang Chong's concern for her. She couldn't help but smile gently. She only felt that her heart was infinitely warm and comfortable. She turned around and strode away. His unusually tall and fit body was still as masculine and valiant as ever, full of vigor and vigor. Xiang Chong only felt that his heart was beating like a drum. Seeing Zhang Xuejuan leave, he finally couldn't help but follow her. "You go back." Zhang Xuejuan turned around. "No." Xiang Chong shook his head. "Go back. Be obedient." Zhang Xuejuan's face was a little red. "You do your thing. I won't disturb you. I'll just watch from the side." Xiang Chong was very determined. Zhang Xuejuan bit her lips. Her eyes were filled with shyness, tenderness, and gentleness. Suddenly, he had a feeling that he wanted nothing more. As a woman, with such a husband, what more could she ask for? This life was enough. "When we return to Fenghai, let's pick a date to get married," Zhang Xuejuan said, biting her lips. "Ah!" Xiang Chong was overjoyed. Are you serious?" "Idiot." Zhang Xuejuan rolled his eyes and turned away. "Is what you said true?" Xiang Chong shouted from behind, his face full of joy. Zhang Xuejuan did not answer. "You can't go back on your word." Xiang Chong's face was full of smiles as he walked. "Humph. A gentleman keeps his word," Xiang Chong shouted. "We'll get married when we get back." "You said it." "Shut up. Lower your voice." Zhang Xuejuan's face was red. He was unhappy. Many of the Zhang family members heard, and could not help but roar with laughter. Oh! Everyone cheered. Zhang Xuejuan's face was red. She lowered her head and rushed forward. Xiang Chong grinned and smiled happily. He followed behind and looked into the ancestral hall. He felt that today had suddenly become so beautiful. The surrounding Zhang family members also looked at him kindly. Occasionally, 2 people would come over to tease him, and Xiang Chong would reply with a chuckle. Everyone seemed to be very happy. In the ancestral hall, the descendants of the Zhang family kept coming forward to test it. Drop after drop of Zhang family blood essence dripped on the jade pendant. However, the jade pendant did not have any reaction. A group of men tried one by one, but no one had any reaction. The Zhang family went from their initial ecstasy to extreme disappointment. Could it be that this immortal fate was not fated with the Zhang family? Women, even if they could, they would still belong to another family. And this was also the reason why Zhang Xuejuan, the number 1 genius of the Zhang family, was placed at the back. Because the men had to be tested first. Zhang Xuejuan also understood this point. After all, she was going to get married. Once she got married, she would belong to another family. With her talent and the resources that the family had invested in her all these years, that it was already very generous of them to not let her stay at home. All the men had failed. The Zhang family members were extremely disappointed. But things had already reached this stage. How could they stop? Hence, they arranged for the Zhang family women to continue testing. However, no one could make the jade pendant change. Until Zhang Xuejuan cut her middle finger and dripped her blood on the jade pendant. At this moment, the jade pendant suddenly emitted a bright red light. The red light was very gentle. Even Zhang Xuejuan herself was stunned for a moment. "It's done. There's a reaction." Everyone in the Zhang family was stunned. Then, they cheered in unison. It would be best if there was a man with immortal fate. But as long as there was someone in the Zhan family who could trigger immortal fate, it was still a great opportunity. It's Xuejuan. Xuejuan has immortal fate. That's great. That's great. Ha ha ha, it's finally done. It's immortal fate indeed. God bless the Zhan family. The inside was in an uproar. Everyone in the Zhan family was dancing with joy. Xiang Chong was standing at the outermost entrance. He was an impatient person to begin with, so when he heard this, he couldn't help but squeeze in, wanting to take a look. Only Zhan Xuejuan, who was directly involved, faintly felt that something was wrong, because she found that in the red light that suddenly appeared, the jade pendant seemed to have a touch of faint black qi, rising along with the red light. It was just that it was covered by the red light. Those who were not close would not be able to see it. This black aura vaguely made one's heart palpitate, and Zhan Xuejuan, who was closest to him, faintly felt that this was very wrong. If it was really immortal fate, why would there be such an uncomfortable black aura? Just when Zhan Xuejuan vaguely felt that something was wrong and wanted to do something, she was stunned to find that the jade pendant had already stuck to her hand. The light seemed to be getting brighter and brighter, but the blood in her body was also continuously flowing into the jade pendant. It was endless, as if there was no end to it. The red light became brighter and brighter. It dyed half the sky red. The cheers grew louder and louder. As the red light became brighter, the black aura also increased. Gradually it formed a vague door. Inexplicable music seemed to come from the heavens, making people feel relaxed and happy when they heard it. This is immortal music. This is immortal music. The Zhan family members were all trembling with excitement. Xiang Chong squeezed in desperately. Let me see, let me see. He had already seen Zhan Xuejuan in the red light. She was like a fairy. For some reason, Xiang Chong felt that she was very far away. It was as if Zhan Xuejuan was standing in this red light, and was separated from him by two different worlds. It was unreachable. He squeezed forward with all his might. He widened his eyes and shouted with a trembling voice, Xuejuan. Xuejuan. You, how are you? Zhan Xuejuan was stunned. Her eyes were a little confused. The cheers of the people around her seemed to come from the heavens. Her consciousness was gradually blurring. It was as if she had forgotten everything. Her body was also a little light. It was as if she was about to fly off the ground and ascend. However, when Xiang Chong's voice sounded, Zhan Xuejuan's heart suddenly became clear. Xiang Chong, yes, it's Xiang Chong. It's the voice of my lover. It's him. I want to marry him. I want to spend my life with him. Become an immortal? I don't want to. I want to get married. I want to stay. Zhan Xuejuan struggled with all her might. Suddenly, she finally regained a trace of clarity. In the red light in front of her, the black gas was becoming more and more obvious. The door was already very clear, and open. Others still couldn't detect it. But when Zhan Xuejuan suddenly regained a trace of clarity, she had already seen a ferocious demonic aura, something that looked like a monster, as if it was going to come out from here. It looked excited, and its eyes were shining. It was about to rush out. Zhan Xuejuan was horrified. She only felt that all the hair on her body suddenly stood up. She felt that something was wrong. She came to a conclusion. This was definitely not an immortal fate. Then she suddenly remembered what Xiang Chong said. The gods Wuxia once said that she had a great disaster, that this was not an immortal fate. Zhan Xuejuan bit her lips and instantly made a decision. This was an immortal fate. Evil and unorthodox ways. How can I let you have your way? At the last moment when the door was about to form, Zhan Xuejuan activated all the remaining strength in her body. With a clang, she pulled out her sword and shouted. Without hesitation, she cut off her left hand. Using the most extreme method, she resolutely stopped the process of blood pouring into the jade pendant. With a fierce kick, she sent the broken hand and the jade pendant flying. The heavenly music stopped abruptly. The demon that was about to rush out suddenly froze in the door, as if it was solidified. At this moment, a furious roar came from the door. How dare you, lowly servant! Xiang Chong had just squeezed in when he saw this scene. He couldn't help but be scared out of his wits. With his eyes wide open, he shouted, Xuejuan. Zhang Xuejuan felt that the black gas was like silk threads that had completely tied her up. She couldn't retreat. With all the strength in her body she shouted, "Don't come over!" The long sword in her hand was thrown out like lightning. With a bang, the sword hilt hit Xiang Chong's chest and sent him flying. Zhang Xuejuan shouted, "Back off! You back off! Everyone back off! Don't come over!" Boom! That red light suddenly spread out, and threw everyone away. Then, the black light lingered and spread, and the door was rapidly closing. Zhang Xuejuan panted and looked forward to it. It looked like it was about to close. But at the last moment when the door was about to close, the black smoke turned into a big hand. It reached out from the door and grabbed Zhang Xuejuan. "Lowly servant, you spoiled my plans." With a whoosh, Zhang Xuejuan's bloodstained body was caught by the big black hand. "You are indeed a heroine that only appears once in tens of thousands of years. Just when I was about to succeed, you still spoiled my plans." A ferocious voice gradually disappeared as the door closed, cutting off the hand and feeling the pulse. "You are really bold. Let me see how hard your bones are." With another whoosh, the red light, the black gas, the door, and the source of all the trouble, the jade pendant, all disappeared. It disappeared together with Zhang Xuejuan. A roar came from an unknown space. It was Zhang Xuejuan's heartbreaking roar. "Don't wait for me. Don't look for me." The voice stopped abruptly. Chapter 10:14. The door was suddenly closed. The red light and the black gas suddenly disappeared. Zhang Xuejuan's screams seemed to still reverberate in the air. Only Zhang Xuejuan's severed left hand was left on the ground. The Zhan family members who were cheering until their voices were hoarse were all dumbfounded. What? What was going on? Why did it suddenly? "Xuejuan!" Xiang Chong let out a hoarse roar, rushing forward with all his might. But the door was completely closed. Xiang Chong missed his target and crashed into the offering table in the ancestral hall, breaking it into pieces. "Xuejuan, where are you? Where did you go?" "Aha!" Xiang Chong almost went crazy. Where did she go? Xiang Chong frantically tried every method he could think of, but he was still unable to find any information about Zhang Xuejuan. The only thing he had left was the incense burning in the ancestral hall of the Zhan family. However, after the jade pendant disappeared, the incense had turned into an incomparably foul smell. The Zhan family members were dumbfounded. Wasn't this an immortal fate? Why? Did it suddenly become a disaster? Where was Zhang Xuejuan? Where was the immortal? That music? Where did the red light go? What exactly happened? No one could explain. Xiang Chong did not cry, nor did he go into a daze. He just went crazy, but he forced himself to calm down. He used the knife to stab his arms and legs a few times before he regained some consciousness. "I can't go crazy. I have to wake up. I have to go find her." He broke the burning incense, leaving a small half of it that was not completely burned, and carefully picked up Zhang Xuejuan's left hand on the ground. The jade hand was still warm and soft, as if there were still remnants of her gentleness. Xiang Chong held the severed hand, feeling as if a knife was cutting his heart. He took Zhang Xuejuan's left hand and bid farewell to the Zhan family members. "I have to go find her. I will find her no matter where I go." Xiang Chong quickly rushed back to Fenghai City to find Li Chenglong and Zhuo Xiaoduo. He knew that the only person he could count on to help him was probably Zhuo Xiaoduo alone. Only Zhuo Xiaoduo had made a prophecy in advance. Zhang Xuejuan's disaster. Only Zhuo Xiaoduo might have a way to deal with it. He frantically contacted Zhuo Xiaoduo. However, at this moment, Zhuo Xiaoduo could not be contacted. No matter if it was by phone or any other means of contacting him through the internet, none of them could be reached. Xiang Chong almost went crazy. He could only choose to ask Li Chenglong for help. Xiang Chong was very clear-headed. He knew that his IQ was not high enough, let alone now that his mind was in a mess. At this moment, only Li Chenglong was quick-witted and could help him, calmly helping him to plan. Li Chenglong was now on his way back. He lived up to everyone's expectations and found the severely injured Meng Zhongjun and the others. He also rescued them. Then, on the way back, he received a call from Xiang Chong. Li Chenglong rushed back through the night and saw Xiang Chong. Then, he forcefully detained Xiang Chong in the villa and did not allow him to take a step out. At this time, it was easy to get into trouble. Zhan Xuejuan was already in trouble. Xiang Chong could not have any more accidents. Looking at the dazed Xiang Chong, Li Chenglong only felt waves of powerlessness at this moment. He only thought of one sentence: fate, destiny, irreversible. Zhuo Xiaoduo had long predicted that Zhan Xuejuan would meet with a calamity of certain death. Therefore, he specially instructed himself to keep a close eye on her, so that she could avoid the calamity. However, everything was fine, and she had already left the Zhan family. But because he was transferred away by a phone call, the subsequent events changed and took a turn for the worse. First, Zhuo Xiaoduo was busy with something and disappeared. He did not know how to deal with Zhan Xuejuan. He could only try his best to prevent the possibility of anything happening. Everything was going smoothly, but at the last moment, a phone call and a mission transferred him away. Because of this, there was a gap. Zhan Xuejuan, who had already left, was called back and killed herself. Tell me, with all these things happening one after another, where can you go to reason? Thinking back to Zhuo Xiaoduo's words, Li Chenglong could only feel his heart palpitating. Destiny. Even if you know it, you may not be able to escape it. Li Chenglong frantically searched for Zhuo Xiaoduo. The current situation was beyond his ability to deal with. However, he was shocked to find that Xiang Chong could not contact Zhuo Xiaoduo, and he could not contact Zhuo Xiaoduo either. Even their unique communication method was useless. Isn't all of this too much of a coincidence? Li Chenglong only felt that it was inconceivable. He could not believe it. Everything was inconceivable. Xiang Chong had just encountered such an irreversible thing. And on the other side, he could not contact the key person who could help him the most. Who dared to say that this was not God's will? Where did Zhuo Xiaoduo go? Li Chenglong had chosen to look for Zhuo Xiaoduo himself when he had discovered that Zhuo Xiaoduo had disappeared. This was because too many people and things were involved in this matter. What if Zhuo Xiaoduo had only returned to his hometown? What if he had gone to the Nine Heavens Pavilion to accompany Zhuo Xiaoyan? Or perhaps he had gone into closed-door training? Li Chenglong knew that Zhuo Xiaoduo had such a space. He would not be able to receive any news as long as he went in to train. It was no different from him vanishing from the face of the earth. Therefore, Li Chenglong rushed back to the Phoenix City at night to confirm the situation. He visited Hu Ruoyun and teacher Hu, and learned that Zhuo Xiaoduo had already left. So he ran back again. Even if he suddenly had an epiphany and was in that space, Zhuo could not have stayed there for more than 24 hours. Li Chenglong calculated silently. His phone was always charged. Since he had rushed back from the Phoenix City, he had been anxiously calling every few minutes. He had been full of hope every time. He had hoped that the other party would come out of closed-door training. However, his hopes had been dashed every time. If Zhuo had really gone into closed-door training for some reason, and had encountered a critical juncture, it might have taken a little longer. But it would not have taken more than 36 hours. He is not a person who would not give instructions. Li Chenglong was burning with anxiety. He rushed back to the Fenghai city and returned to the villa as soon as possible. He burned incense for Grandma Shi, and the principal changed the offerings. Then, he sat in the living room and waited quietly for Zhuo Xiaoduo's reappearance. However, 24 hours had passed, and there was no news. 36 hours had passed, and there was still no news. At this moment, Xiang Chong, Xiang Bing Gao Qiao, Yu Yan, Zhen Piapiao Pai Bao, and the other members of Zhuo Xiaoduo's gang had already been waiting in the villa. However, they did not dare to enter the living room. They could only wait outside. It was probably because Li Chenglong's temper was unprecedentedly hot. It was almost as if he would explode at the slightest provocation. No one wanted to, mainly because they did not dare to provoke Li Chenglong at this time. Li Chenglong sat in the living room for a long time. His eyes were slightly closed. He seemed to be taking a nap, but in fact he was thinking nervously. Where did Zhuo go? If he did not act on his own initiative, and had an accident, then what kind of accident could it be? A life and death crisis? If it wasn't for the sudden turn of events with his character, he wouldn't have left no traces behind. Then the person he's facing must be an extremely powerful expert. One that far surpasses us. No, it should be far beyond what Boss Zhuo can handle. 36 hours. I can't wait any longer. The situation has changed. It is not at a level that I can handle alone. Li Chenglong did not hesitate anymore. He took out his phone and called Yi Chongqing and Wen Xingtian. Zhuo Xiaoduo was missing. When Yi Chongqing and Wen Xingtian heard this breaking news, they were almost scared to death. The two of them rushed to the villa immediately to confirm the situation. In particular, when Zhuo Xiaoduo was last seen in Phoenix City, they called Hu Ruoyan and her husband to confirm it repeatedly. Then the two of them reported this big news to their superiors. Yi Chongqing immediately called Nan Zhengqian, the chief of the southern region. Marshal Nan. Nan Zhengqian's voice was very bright. Chongqing, Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Marshal Nan. Something happened on our side, Yi Chongqing said. What could have happened on your side? Minister Nan should be in the military camp, having a meal with his subordinates. He could clearly hear the sound of laughter and shouting next to him. Zhuo Xiaoduo is missing. Yi Chongqing's mood was unusually heavy, and his tone was unusually cold. On the other side, Nan Zhengqian suddenly paused. Then he heard a sudden sound. Obviously, Nan Zhengqian came out of his room. He hurriedly asked, "What? Say that again." Yi Chongqing sighed. Zhuo Xiaoduo is missing. He should have disappeared during the Spring Festival break. We can't contact him no matter what. As he spoke, he went into detail about the investigation, the last traces of Zhuo Xiaoduo, before he went missing, and the people he came into contact with. Then he went into detail. On the other side, Marshal Nan had been holding his breath for a long time, but he didn't say a word. He listened quietly and summarized the information. He seemed to be very calm and unperturbed. When Yi Chongqing finished, Nan Zhengqian asked with unusual calmness, "Is there anything else you want to add?" Yi Chongqing thought quickly and looked at Li Chenglong. Li Chenglong shook his head. "No, that's all the information we have now. Information about Zhuo Xiaoduo must not be spread. You just wait quietly. Remember, don't spread even a single piece of information. No one is allowed to spread it. Wait for my call at any time." Marshal Nan immediately hung up the phone. The room fell into an unprecedented silence. Yi Chongqing took a deep breath. He felt his heart beating so fast that it almost jumped out of his throat. His legs were a little weak. "How is it?" Li Chenglong asked. "Don't spread the news. Don't act rashly. Don't spread the news." Yi Chongqing staggered and sat on the sofa. He looked at Li Chenglong and said, "Besides you, who else knows?" "No one. No one. No one." Gao Qiaoer's eyes suddenly flashed and said, "Sister Nian. She's swollen. You didn't tell her, right?" Li Chenglong shook his head. "How dare I? The most important thing now is her. When no one is looking at her, I don't dare to say anything. Who can guarantee how she will react?" Chapter 10:15. Gao Qiaoer heaved a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that he didn't say anything. Now that something has happened to Zhuo, what I'm most afraid of is that our family is in a mess. If Sister Nian loses control, we will be even more helpless and helpless. What should we do next? Wait. We can only wait." When Xingtian sat down slowly, his eyes focused. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time he said softly, "Xiaoduo is good at divination. He can see life and death, fortune and misfortune. He knows better than anyone how to seek fortune and avoid calamity, avoid death and prolong life. He will be fine. Maybe he is just temporarily trapped and can't contact us. No news is actually good news. As Qiaoer said, let's not think too much and panic. Minister Nan has already intervened in this matter. He will find a way to find Xiaoduo's whereabouts." Everyone nodded silently. Although Wen Xingtian's words were meant to comfort himself, at the moment, no news was indeed good news. There was no need for him to panic. After the assassination attempt by the Dao Alliance's Skysoar realm expert, everyone had truly become jittery and paranoid about the dangers of every bush and tree. At this time, Xiaoduo suddenly disappeared for no reason. Moreover, he disappeared on the way back to Fenghai from Phoenix City. No one dared to continue thinking about what this meant. If they forced themselves to think about it, they wouldn't think in a good direction. Only a moment later, the sky above Fenghai suddenly felt as if a mountain was pressing down on them. An unprecedentedly powerful aura suddenly arrived. With a boom, the person broke through the sky and came in. It was the king of Zhuelu and his wife, who had arrived in Fenghai. The king of Zhuelu, Yun Zhonghu, Baiyun Fairy, and Baiyun Duo were surrounded by the biting cold air from the sky. They landed in the villa's courtyard with a whoosh and teleported to the living room in the next moment. What happened? Is this what happened? Searched the entire way. Yun Zhonghu's aura was fully unleashed, and his murderous aura soared to the heavens. Capture everyone who was on the road or passed by that day. Also, search for the auras of all the experts on this road and capture them. Exterminate all the bandits on this road, and interrogate them one by one. Baiyun Duo jumped in fright. Isn't this a bit too loud? This is big. The murderous intent in Yun Zhonghu's tiger-like eyes was piercingly cold, and a tyrannical aura rose from his body. Once any suspicious points are confirmed, blood will flow for thousands of miles, and the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. It will be nothing more than a trivial matter. Li Chenglong and the others were stunned by the conversation between the couple. Who is this? Why is it so easy to put people in misery and suffering? Move out now. Yun Zhonghu's cloak fluttered as he turned around and walked out. From now on, all officials and organizations in the astral souls are to listen to my orders. My orders are strictly enforced. If there is any disobedience, if there is any negligence, the bloodline of all 9 generations will be wiped out. Do not blame me for not warning you. At this moment, Yun Zhonghu had completely gone crazy. Now, he really wanted to kill someone to vent the huge negative emotions in his heart. Little junior brother had gone missing. The only bloodline of master and mistress had gone missing. Pass down my orders. Investigate the 12 major cities in the vicinity first. Uproot all the Dao League and Umno Alliance's strongholds, spies. I want to interrogate them personally. The Dao League is still in alliance. Baiyun Duo said worriedly. We still have to report this to Uncle Yu. Even if we are not afraid of being held accountable, it will still be troublesome. Alliance special fuck. Troublesome, fucking troublesome. Yun Zhonghu's eyes were red. Who cares about the alliance now? Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. Investigate thoroughly. Tiger Guards Yunkai assemble. Give up on everything and rush back quickly to investigate this matter thoroughly. Yun Zhonghu pointed at the dozen Tiger Guards and Yunkai behind him. 3 days. Yes. Heavenly King. More than a dozen people sat in more than a dozen directions. All of them unleashed their auras and whistled away. During this time, there were people coming and leaving continuously. In the sky above Fenghai, the wind and clouds surged, and the sky changed color. The wind blew in the sky, and the Heavenly King of the right, Yu Dongtian, arrived with a murderous look on his face. Have you found anything? Have you found any clues? No. All of you go and help. A figure flashed. Nan Zhengqian had also arrived. You still haven't found anything? Hurry up and go back to your southern army. You're just causing trouble here. The king of Zhuelu cursed. Get lost. Nan Zhengqian paused. His eyes were a little red. Then he turned around and left. If you find anything, send me a message as soon as possible. Then he flew into the sky. What should we do? Yu Dongtian and Yun Zhonghu looked at each other. Should we inform? Both of them rubbed their hands. Xiaoduo, go to Shangjing and keep an eye on Xiaonian. Don't let her know about Xiao Duo's disappearance, and don't let her run around. Yun Zhonghu said to his wife. Okay. Immediately. Understood. Baiyun Duo rushed into the sky like a stream of light, galloping far away. Yi Changqing, Wen Xingtian, and the others saw the series of changes and the arrival of several important people. They were all stunned and speechless for a long time. This time, the heavenly kings of the right and left came with their original faces. They didn't disguise themselves, so they were naturally recognized at a glance. The many guesses they had about Zhuxiaodua's identity in the past were finally confirmed at this moment. As expected, there was indeed a great background behind this kid. Otherwise, the heavenly kings of the right and left wouldn't have come in person as soon as something happened to this kid. Moreover, they directly tore through space to come here. Their urgency was unprecedented. Even when they were at the Sun and Moon Pass, facing enemies 10 times their number, the two heavenly kings weren't so flustered. What should we do next? We still have to talk about it. Yu Dongtian anxiously transmitted his voice to Yin Zhonghu. Master is now at the most critical moment. Yin Zhonghu's eyebrows twitched. We are about to achieve everything. If we are disturbed at this time, it is very likely that all our efforts will be in vain. But if we don't say it, we will be beaten to death. Yu Dongtian's eyebrows also twitched. Let's look for it first. Look for it for 2 days. Yin Zhonghu gritted his teeth. 2 days later, if we find it, then it's fine. If we can't find it, at that time, we will consider whether to tell Master. I will bear all the consequences caused by this matter. Yin Zhonghu repeated and made up his mind. The murderous intent in his eyes was almost tangible. You will bear the blame? Are you sure you can bear it? Shouldn't you tell my father first? Yu Dongtian looked hesitant and said, My father is guarding. What I mean is, if he's here to take the blame, the both of us will feel better. Yin Zhonghu looked at Yu Dongtian a little angrily. You are getting more and more overboard. Now you even want to push the blame to your own father? Yu Dongtian had an embarrassed look on his face. Uncle, you can't take the blame for this matter. Yin Zhonghu said. Fuck, I have been confused by you. Is this the time to push the blame? Master and mistress are in closed-door cultivation. The task of looking after little junior brother naturally falls to me. If something happens to little junior brother, then it is my problem. Even if Master doesn't say a word, I will still be ashamed. At this time, you still have the mood to think about pushing the blame. Do you believe that I will beat you to death with one punch? Okay. Let's look first. What if we find it soon? Okay. Who do you think did it? Yu Dongtian asked telepathically. The Dao League is more likely. Yin Zhonghu gritted his teeth. I think so too. The sky flickered, and a tyrannical aura shrouded the sky. A person in white descended from the sky. It was a woman in a white robe. Her face was picturesque, and her appearance was peerless. What happened? The woman frowned and looked at the two heavenly kings. Aunt Wu, don't worry. Nothing happened. Yin Zhonghu hurriedly bowed. Why did she come out? She was famous for being untouchable. Looking at the entire Astral Souls continent, she was one of the 3 most untouchable women. She was ranked before his wife, second only to his master's wife. The woman in white carried a guqin on her back. When she heard Yin Zhonghu's words, the guqin suddenly appeared in her hand. Her slender hands gently plucked the strings. It's really nothing. Yin Zhonghu said anxiously. It's a matter of the younger generation. You don't have to worry about it. You are also very busy. Hurry. The woman in white snorted. After a moment of silence, she said, Where is your master? My master is in seclusion. Yin Zhonghu coughed and replied, Of course. Cough. He is in seclusion with my master's wife. Boom. Yin Zhonghu was immediately sent flying more than 3 feet. Damn it. The woman in white flew away. Before she left, she kicked Yin Zhonghu to vent her anger. Even if you don't say it, I will investigate it myself. Yin Zhonghu looked sullen, but he did not dare to speak. When the woman in white left, he finally stood up with a grimace. He still had lingering fears. Didn't they say that there is still some time before the Battle of the Worlds? Why did she jump out now? You ask me, but who should I ask? Yu Dongtian, who had been pretending to be a quail at the side, finally came back to life. How scary. That master's wife of yours is really not scary. You dared to say it to her face. I don't dare. Let's get down to business first. It is said that the people of the Dao League and the Feng family have been very active in the White Mountain and Blackwater area recently. They are looking for information everywhere. Yu Dongtian said. Well, I heard about this too. They seem to be looking for someone, the king of Zulu said. But the person they are looking for seems to be the third prince. It has nothing to do with little junior brother. The heavenly king of the right nodded. That little guy from the royal family is an idiot. After doing such a thing, he actually left clues for the Dao League. I think they will find out about him soon. Yesterday, the Feng family already sent a few experts to Shangjing. The king of Zwulu said lightly, but this matter is not within my jurisdiction. I have no intention of interfering. The heavenly king of the right said, me too. The two of them stood in the sky and chatted, the entire Fenghai city under their feet, including all the movements in the surroundings, was within the range of their divine senses. As time passed, the two of them became more and more impatient. Chapter 10:16. The two heavenly kings felt their hearts beating faster and faster. They had a vague feeling that a great disaster was about to befall them. Unfortunately, there was nothing to talk about. They could only stare and endure. By the way, there was a sudden rainstorm in the UMNO alliance yesterday. Do you think it has something to do with Xiaoduo? Yu Dongtian tried to find a topic to talk about. It's two different things. It's two completely different things. Yin Zhonghu said, that strange phenomenon was caused by the Flood Witch's breakthrough. Sigh. Yu Dongtian was also a little envious. Flood. This senior is really a genius. He's worthy of being invincible. If little junior brother grows up, he won't be inferior to him. The life of invincibility won't belong to him forever. Moreover, there's still Master. After Master completes his breakthrough this time, he might not necessarily be inferior to the Flood Witch. Yin Zhonghu said slowly. Suddenly, the murderous intent in his eyes exploded. No matter who took little junior brother this time, I'll definitely make him pay the price. The topic was back again. Yu Dongtian looked at Yin Zhonghu, who was about to explode, and tactfully kept quiet. On this day, from Fenghai to Phoenix City and the surrounding areas, all the bandits were unlucky. All the strongholds of the UMNO alliance and the Dao League were uprooted. There were no exceptions. All the nearby cities, all the organizations, all the armies, all the officials, all the martial artists were all included in the unified command. The entire country's machinery operated with unprecedented efficiency. The power it exerted was really terrifying. Countless people had committed crimes their whole lives. They originally wanted to continue living freely, but today they were dealt with. Countless people were caught at the right time. Countless people were caught because of inappropriate comments. Under the command of the furious King Zwulu, this road and the surrounding 9 major cities were cleaned up, as if they had been washed away by a rainstorm. Those who escaped the net time and time again were really, not a single one was spared this time. Moreover, this sweeping storm continued to spread to the surrounding cities, becoming more and more intense as time passed. The UMNO alliance was fine, but the Dao League was a part of the alliance. Very soon, the higher-ups called to protest and asked for the release of the people. However, in the eyes of the king of Zwulu, there was only one word for it. Scram. In Shangjing, Zhuo was already restless and anxious. Since returning to Shangjing, Zhuo had completed several tasks in a row. She should have eliminated her hostility, or at least not be so motivated. Balancing work with rest was the right thing to do. However, she didn't know why, but she felt that her heart was full of murderous intent. She couldn't get rid of it, so she killed several batches of targets in a row. Every time he passed by the third prince's residence, this feeling would increase dramatically. The thought of directly killing his way in and slaughtering his way in would never go away. The more he thought about it, the more intense it became. As a result, she was like a powder keg that could explode at any time. I didn't even get to spend New Year's Eve with Gouda. This new year is such a waste. Zhuo was very unhappy about this. Although he tries to take advantage of me when I'm with Gouda, but I can beat him up. Not to mention that after the first day of the new year, she couldn't get through to Zhuo when she tried to call him. If it was just once or twice, it wouldn't be a big deal. Maybe this brat entered the Tower of Annihilation to cultivate, so it was reasonable that he couldn't get through to her. If it was 3 or 5 times, it would still be reasonable. After all, She called him within 1 or 2 days. However, on the third day of the new year, 2 days had passed. Not only did this brat not take the initiative to call her back, but he also couldn't get through as before. This was a problem. Obviously, he's got a lot of guts. If he doesn't get beaten up for 3 days, he's going to do whatever he wants. Zhuo Xiaoyan was fuming. She was already planning thousands of torture methods in her heart. The next time she saw Gouda, she would definitely teach this disobedient fellow a lesson. This was intolerable. Even if she could tolerate it, she couldn't tolerate it. However, Zhuo Xiaoyan liked to think about things that were pricking her lungs. She thought that Gouda must be busy flirting with girls, right? Or perhaps he was trying to please some shameless woman who seduced her fiancé. Or flirting in front of other girls. The next time I see him, I'll beat him to death. No, I can't beat him to death. The next time I see him, I'll have a cold war with him. I'll ignore him. He'll be anxious to death. I'll let him coax me. He won't be able to coax me even if he tries 8 or 10 times. The number of times I call him is more than the number of times I call him. I can't forgive him so easily. I must keep a tight grip on him. Another day passed impatiently. On the 4th day of the new year, she still couldn't get through to Gouda. Zhuo Xiaoyan couldn't help but feel restless. Although little doggy liked to talk nonsense, he wasn't someone who didn't tell him what to do. Could it be that something had happened? Did something happen? Originally, because she was annoyed, she planned to use the mission as an excuse to divert her attention. However, she became absent-minded, and her temper became more and more fiery. According to Zhuo Xiaoyan's understanding of Zhuo Xiaoduo, he would definitely not ignore her calls. Especially after so many times in one breath. The wheels of time were turning. Seeing that it was the 5th day of the new year, Zhuo Xiaoyan couldn't hold it in anymore. I have a mission tonight and tomorrow morning. After I finish my mission and catch these scums, I'll immediately ask for leave and go to Fenghai. I'll see what happened. That night, when Zhuo Xiaoyan went out on a mission, she immediately used her peak returning mysterious realm freezing energy and froze the target, the entire bandit nest, into ice. Her method was fast, simple and violent. Everyone who went out on the mission with her was terrified. What the hell is this still returning mysterious realm? Even a peak flying heavens expert wouldn't be able to do this, right? The next morning, after handing in the mission, Zhuo Xiaoyan directly asked for leave. I have something to do and need to go to Fenghai. Okay, let's temporarily set the time for leave for a week. It might be delayed. It's okay. Half a month is fine. Zhuo Xiaoyan's mouth twitched. When other people asked for leave, they would be scolded. However, when it was her turn to ask for leave, not only was she happy and comfortable, but she was also more considerate. If she asked for a day, she would be given 2 days. If she asked for 2 days, she would be given 7 days. If she asked for a week, she would be given half a month. Zhuo Xiaoyan was naturally aware of the obvious difference in treatment. While he was grateful, he also raised his vigilance. You're being so lenient and considerate to me. You don't have other thoughts, do you? Even though the old man in front of her looked old and senile, Zhuo Xiaoyan didn't let her guard down. If you really have other thoughts with my current cultivation, I can freeze you into an ice cube in a matter of minutes. If the leader in charge of the returning mysterious realm group knew that Zhuo Xiaoyan had such thoughts, he would probably vomit blood. It's not that I have other thoughts about you. It's just that you have too much background. I really can't afford to offend you. As usual, Zhuo Xiaoyan exuded a gust of cold wind. She directly soared into the sky and left Shangjing. However, the cold wind around her was much colder than before. However, she didn't know if it was a coincidence or not. As soon as she left Shangjing, she met Bai Yunduo, who was rushing towards her. Zhuo Xiaoyan obviously knew Bai Yunduo. When the starry mountains opened, Bai Yunduo was standing in the sky and monitoring all the teams. Zhuo Xiaoyan knew that this patrol inspector was a big shot who stood at the peak of the entire astral souls. Now that she saw her, even someone as arrogant as her didn't dare to neglect her. She was the first to greet her. Hello, patrol inspector. Zhuo Xiaoyan. Bai Yunduo pretended to be surprised. You're Zhou Xiaonian from the Nine Heavens Pavilion, right? Your codename is Civet? Zhou Xiaonian said respectfully. That's Xiaonian. I didn't expect Patrol Inspector to know me. Zhou Xiaonian really didn't expect Bai Yunduo to know her name. Under normal circumstances, her information was far from being qualified to enter the eyes of such a big shot. She really didn't expect this high and mighty patrol inspector to know her. Even Zhou Xiaonian couldn't help but feel proud. You look like you're in a hurry. Where are you going? Can you tell me? I'm going to Fenghai. Oh, what a coincidence. I just came back from Fenghai. Bai Yunduo smiled confidently. Oh, you're going to Fenghai to see your brother? How do you know everything? Zhou Xiaonian was surprised. You and your brother are both on the top genius list of the astral souls. Bai Yunduo casually made up a list and smiled amiably. And on this list, there are only a total of 6 people. Even if I don't want to be familiar with all of you, I really can't do it. Haha, I see. Zhou Xiaonian was enlightened. Everything made sense. Zhou Xiaonian was well aware of her and Puppy's innate talents. She knew that if there was such a list, the two of them would definitely be the first and second place at the top. This wasn't out of modesty. The esteemed master had already proved this point. It wasn't surprising that the astral souls had another list of heavenly talents that they paid special attention to. Zhou Xiaonian even thought that Li Qinglong might be among the 6 people. She just didn't know where he was ranked. Zhou Xiaonian had heard too many times from Zhou Xiaoduo about this person, who had been by Puppy's side for the past few years. If you're going to see Zhou Xiaoduo, you might as well not go. You won't be able to see him even if you go. Bai Yunduo chuckled. Well, what do you mean, master? Zhou Xiaoduo rushed back to his hometown in Phoenix City on New Year's Eve to visit his old friends. Due to a chance encounter, his Taoist heart was enlightened, and his state of mind was greatly improved. Therefore, the Hidden Dragon High School specially arranged a 1-month hellish cultivation for him. During this period, he's not allowed to bring any communication devices to prevent it from affecting the cultivation. Bai Yunduo said, I believe that after this cultivation, he'll be reborn. He might even be able to catch up with you. Bai Yunduo smiled and said, How is it? This is great news, isn't it? Are you happy? Are you happy? Chapter 10:17. Happy. Happy. Zhou Xiaonian widened her eyes. Apparently, she was shocked by the good news. There was only one thought in her mind. Is he going to catch up with me? How? How is this possible? What? What kind of cultivation is so effective? How can I be reborn? With Bai Yunduo's endorsement, Zhou Xiaonian naturally wouldn't have any doubts. However, a strong sense of danger grew in his heart, and he couldn't stop himself. Oh no! Oh no! Little doggy said that if he catches up with me he will do that. Humph! So embarrassing. Bai Yunduo looked at Zhou Xiaoniantian's cold face, suddenly flushed red. It was so beautiful that she couldn't help but feel a sense of inferiority. As an experienced person, how could she not know what was going on with Zhou Xiaonian? She was very familiar with the relationship between the two. Zhou Xiaoduo sighed as she thought about the uncertain future. She said faintly, Little Nian, should I tell you that your cultivation progress is a little slow? Your brother used to be much slower than you, but now, he is about to catch up with you. When she said this, the Lady of the Clouds felt a little embarrassed. Zhou Xiaonian's cultivation progress, let alone herself, even in the eyes of the top 2 people in the astral souls. It was definitely unprecedented. Well, if Zhou Xiaonian met Zhou Xiaoduo, it could only be said that she was born at the wrong time. Otherwise, she would be the most powerful person in the world. No one could compete with her. This kind of cultivation progress, even compared to those ancient almighty people in the legends who encountered one opportunity with each step, was still one of the best. Very few people could compare to him. Whoever dared to say that Zhou Xiaonian was slow would probably be despised to death. He immediately retorted with a single sentence. This is slow. How fast are you? However, Bai Yunduo's words had hit Zhou Xiaonian's weak spot, and it had instantly broken through his mental defenses. That's right. Compared to little doggy, my cultivation progress is indeed slow, too slow. Zhuo Xiaoyan's state of mind became more and more unstable, and his heart was burning with anxiety. However, she was now thinking of ways to improve herself. She must not let little doggy catch up with her. It would be too embarrassing if little doggy caught up with her now. Since she would not be able to see Zhuo Xiaoduo after going to Fenghai, Zhuo Xiaoyan immediately extinguished the thought of going to Fenghai. Little doggy is cultivating desperately. Why should I go there? To watch him catch up with me? From the beginning to the end, Zhuo Xiaoyan had never doubted that Inspector Baiyun Fairy, the most powerful person in the astral souls, would lie to her. The Lady of the Clouds would never lie to him. Who was he? Why would such a high-end and high-class person come here to lie to her? Was she a university student who suspected that the country's leader was lying to her? This was simply impossible. She would be excited for a long time just to meet her. How could she have any doubts? Zhuo Xiaoyan was probably in this situation now. Thank you for telling me. Zhuo Xiaoyan wanted to go back as soon as possible. Once she went back, she would go into seclusion and seize every moment to cultivate and improve. What are you going to do? Go back and cultivate. Cultivate? Bai Yunduo's face was full of smiles. Anyway, I don't have anything important to do in Shangjing. Where do you live? I'll go with you. Maybe I can give you some advice on cultivation. Speaking of which, part of the reason I came here this time is because of you. Because of me? Zhuo Xiaoyan was surprised. The great Baiyun Fairy came here to look for me? What? Am I such a big shot? Aren't you giving me too much face? Zhuo Xiaoduo is working hard to improve his cultivation. And you also need to improve your cultivation. You need to improve even more. Bai Yunduo said lightly. In half a year, there might be a grand competition between the three clans. At that time, the Umno Alliance, the Tao League, and the Astral Souls will all send their top talents to determine the strongest junior. This competition is still classified as a top secret. Only 2 people from each continent will participate in this competition. The Astral Souls has chosen you and Zhuo Xiaoduo. It's already a sure thing. Although Zhuo Xiaoduo's battle prowess is extremely high, his cultivation base is still lacking. At the very least, he still needs to take a big step forward to ensure his victory. I hope that he can meet the requirements with this opportunity. Your current cultivation realm has reached the lower limit of the set standard, but I'm afraid it's still not enough to get the first place. Bai Yunduo said, Since I have nothing to do, I plan to go to Shangjing to do some things. At the same time, I want to urge you to work hard and improve your cultivation realm. Let's go. I'll go back with you. I want to see the results of your cultivation during this time with my own eyes. You little girl Sai, you've been slacking off recently. Zhuo Xiaoyan was brought back by Bai Yunduo in a daze. Then, she was immersed in the intensive training conducted by Baiyun Fairy. Bai Yunduo used her unique method to squeeze out Zhuo Xiaoyan's potential to the extreme. She personally joined the competition and pointed out many of Zhuo Xiaoyan's shortcomings. After a few rounds, she squeezed out all of Zhuo Xiaoyan's spiritual energy. Then, she let Zhuo Xiaoyan recover, while she stayed by her side to protect her. She completely isolated Zhuo Xiaoyan from the outside world. Her cultivation realm was much higher than Zhuo Xiaoyan's. Every time, she could control her spiritual energy very carefully. She could make Zhuo Xiaoyan completely exhausted, drained her spiritual energy, and shriveled her dantian to the point that there was not a trace of it left. But at the same time, she would never hurt her origin. In this way, the spiritual energy in her dantian was absorbed from nothing to the limit. When her dantian was full again, not only did she have new insights, but she could also slightly expand the capacity of her dantian every time her dantian was full. At Zhuo Xiaoyan's level, it was extremely difficult to expand the capacity of one's dantian. It was directly related to the number of times one had to compress one's cultivation. If one continued to compress like this, Bai Yunduo could even push Zhuo Xiaoyan's cultivation to a whole new level on top of the already shocking foundation. Zhuo Xiaoyan naturally knew the benefits of this. This kind of cultivation method was more than just twice the result with half the effort. It was basically a heaven-sent opportunity. Her cultivation realm improved by leaps and bounds. She's indeed the top of the continent, the top of the mythical level. Zhuo Xiaoyan was full of admiration. I can't let that little dog catch up with me. This is a good opportunity. I must take this opportunity to widen the distance between us. I must widen the distance even more. Zhuo Xiaoyan's eyes were unprecedentedly resolute. Finally, during a break in cultivation, Bai Yunduo asked Zhuo Xiaoyan, "Little Nian, how many times have you suppressed your cultivation at the peak of the returning profound realm?" "Currently only 19 times. There's still a lot of room for compression." Zhuo Xiaoyan answered honestly and respectfully. Cough. Bai Yunduo only felt her throat itch, so she coughed and said, "How many times do you think you can suppress when you really break through to the sky realm?" Zhuo Xiaoyan calculated and said, "I originally expected to suppress about 45 times. However, this time, with the help of Master's extreme compression of her dantian, I estimate that by that time, I should be able to suppress 3 or 4 more times." Her eyes were shining as she said, "If I work harder, I should be able to suppress it to 50 times. If I can suppress it to 51 or 52 times, that would be even better." Bai Yunduo closed her mouth and used all her willpower to control the expression on her face. She nodded gracefully and said, not bad at all. Your performance has far exceeded the scope of ordinary prodigies. However, you still have to work harder. It won't look good if the elder sister is beaten to the ground by the younger brother." "No, definitely not." Zhuo Xiaoyan was full of fighting spirit. She said, "After this special training, I'm confident that I can still beat little doggy single-handedly. It won't be a problem." Bai Yunduo's mouth twitched. "Okay, let's continue. I'll give you a hand. I hope your wish comes true." Zhuo Xiaoduo was thrown far away in the beam of light. He felt like he had been shot out of a rocket launcher, through thousands of mountains and rivers like an egg. In the blink of an eye, he was already far away from the Red Sun mountain range, which was a sea of fire that was thousands of miles in circumference. He also caught a glimpse of the mountains under his feet, which flashed past in a hurry like a line. Hundreds of mountains were left behind in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Zhuo Xiaoduo was not shocked at all. Instead, he was filled with joy. It was indeed Zhu Wu's inheritance. It was indeed awesome. Apart from the inheritance, there was also a layer of protection. It was very thoughtful and strict. Especially for the current me, it was tailor-made and infinitely suitable for me. Looking at the densely packed human heads that looked like ants, there seemed to be at least a few 100,000 of them. Then, looking at the Wizard Alliance's banners that flashed past, Lin felt a chill run down his spine. Zhuo Xiaoduo suddenly had a feeling of being trapped in a hopeless situation. But he had escaped with his life. Awesome. This is really awesome. I didn't expect there to be such a trick. In this way, I have directly escaped the encirclement of hundreds of thousands of people. Moreover, with my current speed, each person is in a different direction. The higher-ups of the UMNO Alliance will definitely not be able to determine where I am. It's getting harder and harder to determine. Since the higher-ups of the UMNO Alliance can't determine where I am, that hateful old man, who is in the hinterland of the UMNO Alliance, will naturally be even more powerless. I can only completely get rid of him. I have gotten rid of this huge trouble. Zhuo Xiaoduo felt relaxed all over. Looking outside the beam of light, he saw thousands of mountains and rivers flashing past. Under the extreme relaxation, he could not help but feel refreshed and even high-spirited. For a moment, he was in the mood of being lonely at the top, and his poetic interest was greatly aroused. Traveling to the North Sea in the morning and Kanggu in the evening, the golden crow in the sleeve is bold. No one in the UMNO Alliance knows me. The sound of the waves flies across hundreds of thousands of lakes. Yes, it can't be the sound of the waves. It must be the sound of the waves. Chapter 10:18. Zhuo Xiaoduo felt that he had been overindulged. I traversed the UMNO Alliance over thousands of mountains and rivers, rowing a boat without a paddle. His words were full of self-satisfaction, and he even wanted to continue. What's the big deal about traveling to the North Sea in the morning and Kanggu in the evening? It's just that the distance I traversed in these 2 seconds was several times greater than his, alright? Thinking about this, he couldn't help but feel that he was high and mighty. He had a subtle feeling that a person at the peak would feel cold. A sense of loneliness arose in his heart, as if there was no one else but him. Hundreds of thousands of strong enemies besieged and millions of troops chased and intercepted. What kind of dangerous situation was that? This is simply a matter of 10,000 deaths. But I, Master Zhua, passed through it so easily. To me, this kind of deadly encirclement is not something that can be done with a wave of my hand. I'm already thousands of mountains and rivers away, without taking away a single cloud. Although it's not my own ability, but this doesn't stop me from being overindulgent. Because I'm in a good mood. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't move in the beam of light, and was still tightly imprisoned, Xiaoduo would definitely stand with his hands behind his back, standing in the wind, and showing off his cool and graceful manner. Looking at the mountains that seemed to be lined up like flickering lights and passing shadows. And in an instant, thousands of mountains flew past in front of him. Xiaoduo became more and more comfortable. That old bastard whose name I don't know. Let's see how you're going to monitor me. You're really too vicious. What kind of grudge do you have with my father, that you actually put the blame on me? Just you wait. Wait until I achieve great success in my cultivation. I'll definitely take revenge. Even if I can't deal with you for now, I'll still deal with your descendants. I promise I'll take care of them until they cry for their parents. Since this old bastard has descendants, he must have sons, grandsons, great-grandsons and the like, right? Can't I beat one of them? Since he has a daughter, he must have a grandson or something, right? Can't I, Xiaoduo, beat your grandson to death? When I go back and see them, I'll definitely do. As he thought about it, anger rose in his heart, and evil grew in his guts. Dozens of revenge plans were lined up neatly in a row. Just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly saw a dark and lush green, endless forest. Damn, how could there be such a vast forest? He was clearly moving at such a fast speed, and thousands of mountains and rivers were nothing to him. Why was it that he still couldn't see the end of it? Wasn't this forest a bit too big? The forest in front of them was filled with black smoke. That was boundless demonic aura. Waves of dense demonic aura crisscrossed high up in the sky, directly blocking the falling meteorites from far away. No one knew how far they fell, but they couldn't fall into the forest at all. It was as if there was a huge energy shield above the forest, just like a human city. Xiaoduo saw such a strange scene, and subconsciously looked up. He saw that the forest covered at least dozens of mountains. It was too dense and too vast. It was not difficult to guess that there must be countless big demons in the forest from the dense demonic aura in the sky. This is clearly a dangerous place. I can't go in. I have to go over it quickly. Why do I feel that the more I look at it, the clearer it is? Xiaoduo subconsciously looked around and couldn't help but be shocked. The forest in front of him was huge, but it was still nothing compared to the high-speed movement he had done before. The main reason why he couldn't see the end of the forest wasn't because the forest was too big, but because his movement speed had slowed down. The beam of light shield had also disappeared without him noticing. He was in a state where his head was in front, and his feet were behind. He was like a rocket that was shot out of the barrel diving down. And the current position made Xiaoduo inexplicably think of a cartoon he had seen in his dream. It seemed to be called Astro Boy. My current posture, don't I look like Astro Boy who is flying? But I don't seem to have the power to fly. I'm still being imprisoned. Oh heavens, oh earth, oh Zuwu Zhurong. You won't let me crash like this, will you? Unfortunately, Xiaoduo's repeated encounters had exhausted too much of his luck. He didn't even have time to cry out in surprise, before he was already in this diving position. He looked at the earth, and the forest crazily rushing towards him. The sense of déjà vu was getting stronger and stronger. Finally, oh yeah, Xiaoduo closed his eyes. Using his hard skull, he smashed it straight down. Bang! Fuck! Bang! Fuck! Bang! Fuck! After 8 consecutive sounds, Xiaoduo used his hard head to smash through 3 large trees. Only then did he manage to use the power of the Flaming Sun Sutra to protect his body. Following that, He continued to smash through the upper half of 8 large trees that were as thick as houses. The impact was truly shocking and extraordinary. Extreme speed brought about extreme impact. Zuoxiao Duo was like an indestructible divine weapon that directly pierced through everything. Bang! He crashed into a big tree. Fuck. He crashed through a big tree and went straight through it. At the very end, there was an abnormally muffled bang. There was no friction. Zuoxiao's entire body directly stabbed into a big tree in front of him. The last big tree was much bigger than the previous ones. It was almost as thick as Zuoxiao's villa in Fenghai. Its height was at least a few thousand feet high. It was really at the level of a giant tree. Zuoxiao's head, which he had placed high hopes on, played a powerful role like a drill and directly stabbed into the hard trunk of the tree. His head, neck, chest, lower abdomen, and most of his body were stabbed into the big tree with a burp sound. Only his 2 legs were left outside, drooping down dejectedly. At the right time, the hole that was pierced through was too sudden. Due to the friction at high speed, there was even a puff of black smoke coming out from the direction of Zuoxiao's, but it rose in spirals. The big tree trembled, and then a dull sound came out from the trunk of the big tree. It sounded like the movement of a person who was about to suffocate to death. What the fuck? Behind him, diagonally facing the sky, was a huge and penetrating hole that extended into the sky. A hole that was connected by 11 big trees was, of course, a continuous hole. How could it be a lie? At this moment, from the holes of the 11 big trees that were directly pierced through, there was also a puff of black smoke rising in spirals. It seemed that wherever the mountain wind passed, there would be signs of a fire, or even a fire. Such high speed, such rapid friction, such a sudden explosion of a large amount of heat. It seemed that the forest was about to be set on fire. At this moment, the big tree that Zuoxiao was embedded in suddenly moved. The towering treetops that reached into the clouds swayed slightly, and a heavy downpour suddenly fell within a radius of 10,000 feet. Walalala. As soon as the black smoke rose, it disappeared in an instant. The 11 big trees that were pierced through only reacted at this moment, like humans who had woken up from a dream. Their branches and leaves swayed, sending a message of gratitude. Thick branches bent down from the treetops and used their branches and leaves to caress their bodies that were inexplicably pierced through. They were filled with an inexplicable pain. The next moment, a wave of anger and confusion rose to the sky. This was too inhumane. Too inhumane. What the hell was going on? In the words of the human race, it should be unworthy of being a son. We just grew up here quietly, lived a peaceful life, and did not offend anyone. Was this 2-legged beast crazy? Did we offend him? Why did it descend from the sky out of nowhere and pierce through my body? At this moment, half of Zuoxiao's body was embedded in the giant tree, and the tree began to move again. It was so uncomfortable that it kept trembling. It directly crashed into my body, and it was still moving continuously. It was still setting fire. Damn it. It's so painful, it's so bloated. The huge tree was furious. 2 thick tree vines dropped down with a swoosh and wrapped around Zuoxiao's thighs, one on each side, while the other was filled with raging flames. In an instant, they tied him up tightly, and then pulled him out with great force. Go away! Swoosh! Zuoxiao screamed as he was pulled out, as if someone was pulling out a needle from his own body. Then, 2 tree vines wrapped around Zuoxiao and swung him in the air. Then with a whoosh he was thrown out like a baseball. Go away! Zuoxiao was thrown out like a spinning top, and flew high into the sky. Above the vast forest, between the countless branches of the trees, he traveled at an extremely fast speed. However, wherever he passed, it was not a smooth journey, but a path of punishment. Countless trees and thick vines swung nimbly. Each of them used their full strength. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The tree vines whipped the air with explosive sounds, whipping Zuoxiao's body viciously. Pa pa pa. The sounds were all connected together. The vines had already formed countless illusions. Wherever Zuoxiao passed, at least tens of thousands of vines were already swinging in advance. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Revenge. Revenge on this abominable two-legged beast. In just a few seconds, Swishaoduo had already endured no less than 1,000 tree vines whipping him. He spun around like a spinning top, and there were even afterimages of him rolling around. Because the driving force of being thrown away was too great, even thousands of whips couldn't stop him from being thrown away. Buttocks. Now, it was impossible to tell where the buttocks were. His whole body was swollen, and Bai's face was swollen like a pig's head. It was indescribably miserable. Swishaoduo only felt that he had become a spinning top that was being whipped by thousands of people at the same time, that he was like a tiger that had fallen to the plains, being bullied by dogs. He was so aggrieved. But now, his dantian and meridians were finally unblocked, and the flow of his true core energy was no longer obstructed. Ouch! Swishaoduo let out an extremely aggrieved roar, and the Flaming Sun Sutra was instantly activated throughout his body. His entire body was like a small sun, suddenly emitting an enormous amount of heat, spreading out to the extreme. Boundless heat suddenly rose, protecting his entire body. You're still beating me, are you done? Chapter 10:19. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Thousands of tree vines were still waving towards Swishaoduo, but Swishaoduo grabbed them casually. With a shake and a twist, he actually tied a knot with himself as the center. Countless tree vines were entangled in one place. Swishaoduo took this opportunity to get rid of the tree vines whipping him. Immediately, the tree vines began to catch fire again. That was the enormous heat generated by the scorching sun divine art. The extremely hot chi was able to burn the tree vines and counterattack. Do you really think I'm a sick cat if I don't show my power? How dare a bunch of tree demons bully me? Swishaoduo was furious. You've been punished to stand on trees for so many years. How dare you provoke me? I'll roast you one by one. Burn all of you. For a moment, the raging flames soared into the sky and stretched endlessly. Countless tree vines were still unwilling to give up, and continued to entangle him. However, this level of attack was nothing to Swishaoduo, who had recovered. Both of his hands were yin and yang. With a twist, more tree vines were tied together like a gourd. It was a mess. Then, as usual, a small flame flashed. The true fire of the scorching sun divine art suddenly exploded. It was still a small explosion, and continued to burn. The raging flames were about to soar into the sky. Wait! Don't set the fire! An old voice said, "Please be merciful. Please be merciful." The voice of the speaker was quite strange. It was a sound produced by the vibration of soul power and mind power. The accent was extremely ancient and strange. In addition, there was a hint of a muffled sound. Swishaoduo was stunned. After all, he was in a foreign land and did not dare to act rashly. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the voice. There's someone in this world. In the forest, there was a flash of green light. It was like a firefly. Countless trees automatically poured water from the top of the trees and quickly extinguished the fire that had just been ignited. Countless broken vines twisted as if they were in great pain and quickly retracted back into the tree. His vision instantly became clean and refreshed. As far as the eye could see, a tall giant that was at least dozens of meters tall staggered out from the dense forest on the other side. His entire body was covered in fluttering vines and tentacles. The forest was extremely vast, and there was almost no space between the trees. However, the giant in front of him moved at a relatively slow speed. But no matter where he went, there was no obstruction. Clearly, it was impossible to cross the boundary. Even Swishaoduo would be stuck in the small space if he walked over there. However, the giant seemed to be at ease and walked over casually. After he walked over, the trees behind him were still the same. There was no difference from before. It looked extremely magical and incredible. The closer they got, the clearer Swishaoduo could see the true appearance of the giant. He saw that the green leaves covered most of the giant's body, but they still could not cover the giant's legs and body. What covered was the extremely hard bark of the tree. The face was also covered with ancient mottled bark. It was a shocking sight. Only the pair of eyes were as bright as autumn water, untainted by a trace of dust and pleasing to the eye. Swishaoduo took a closer look and found that there was a round hole at the base of the giant's thigh. It seemed to have been drilled by a red-hot soldering iron. It felt burnt, and there was a smell that had just appeared. This shouldn't have been drilled out by me just now, right? Swishaoduo could not help but mutter in his heart. Looking at that part, it was a little mysterious. If it was a little bit deeper, it would be the most important part for a human being. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that he had just drilled out. He could not help but feel lucky. Fortunately, it was the front side. If it was the back side, I would have been a joke for the rest of my life if I had drilled in with my head facing down. I drilled into the giant's reincarnation of the 5 grains. That's what Xiaoduo's thoughts were undeniably strange. As he thought about it, he even shuddered. Young friend, don't look anymore. This hole was drilled out by you just now. The giant's words were full of helplessness. He looked at Swishaoduo with some annoyance. Just now you drilled your head. Here. If it wasn't for the fact that the old tree is relatively hard, you would have drilled your way into its stomach and destroyed its vitality. Swishaoduo coughed and said, I'm sorry. It was really not my intention to come here. If I had a choice, I would not have landed in such a way. The giant rolled his eyes and said, Young friend, please retract your supernatural power and spare my descendants. The surrounding flames were extinguished, but the flame in Swishaoduo's hand was still burning. It was the tree demon's biggest nemesis. The giant looked at the flame in Swishaoduo's hand and was a little afraid. Who are you? Where is this place? Swishaoduo held the flame and had an expression that said, I have your weakness. It was a little like a petty person intoxicated with success. Since these trees were so afraid of fire, wouldn't it be easy to deal with this matter? I may not be afraid of other things but fire. Ha ha ha, I'm not bragging, but I can even set fire to little chicks. I was thrown here all of a sudden. I am unfamiliar with this place. How can I not be intimidated? Therefore, he held the flame even more and waved it left and right. He said proudly, This supernatural power can't be retracted. Haha, it can't be retracted. The giant's old bark-like face showed an extremely human-like expression. It was obvious that he hated the flame in Swishaoduo's hand. This is the heavenly spirit forest. I don't know why you suddenly fell here from the sky, the giant said in a muffled voice. Moreover, you hurt 11 of our people as soon as you landed. It's hard to explain the reason, just by saying that you didn't want to, right? As he spoke, he gestured with his big hand that was full of vines at his thigh. His face, which was full of old bark-like skin, actually twitched. The burls on it also trembled. As if recalling the pain, he said, Including me, there are 12 of us. He said with some indignation, You made a hole in all of us. Swishaoduo said very innocently, I didn't want to make a hole for all of you, but I had no choice. If I had a choice, why wouldn't I come from hundreds of thousands of miles away, just to make a hole for all of you? The giant looked at him seriously. After he finished speaking, he actually thought seriously for a while. Then he said in a muffled voice, But you made a hole and caused us harm. Those 11 clansmen of mine were seriously injured when you went in and out of their bodies. As the giant spoke slowly, the branches and leaves of many big trees nearby swayed. Then, burly giants walked out from the huge trees. Their vines fluttered and gathered in this direction. A few giants walked, and their vines entangled with each other. They couldn't stand steadily and fell to the ground. Then the earth shook and the mountains shook. It was like an earth bowl turning over. Then, they stood up shakily and continued to walk in this direction. Swishaoduo, who was in the middle of a group of giants, was like a little mouse crawling under the feet of a human. If he wanted to talk to the giant, he had to stretch his neck hard to see the giant's big face. Fuck, am I short? I'm almost 1.9 meters tall. Among humans, I'm definitely the tallest. But why is it that here, it's like entering a giant's country? This feeling is really fucking awesome. Swishaoduo said hesitantly. It's a long story. I can't explain it in a short time, but it's really too tiring for me to talk like this. My neck hurts when I raise my head, so I'm not in the mood to talk. Do you understand what I mean? The first giant thought seriously for a moment before he understood what Swishaoduo said. Then he nodded and said, This is easy. Then the vines fluttered, as if they were sending a message. Then, another giant stretched out his huge hand and held the other giant's hand. Then between the two hands, two vines intertwined with each other and grew rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a natural old-fashioned wooden armchair. It stood tall about 60 meters above the ground, just at the same level as the previous giant's head. Swordsmanship was about to jump up when he felt two vines quietly growing under his feet. They steadily lifted him up all the way. As the vines grew rapidly, they reached the left side of the old-fashioned wooden armchair. They lifted Swordsmanship to the top of the armchair. Then with a whoosh, the vines pulled away from Swordsmanship's buttocks. Swordsmanship naturally took advantage of the situation and sat down on the old-fashioned wooden armchair. As soon as he touched it, he felt that it was thick and soft under his buttocks. There was even a faint fragrance. The atmosphere was very pleasant. Swordsmanship patted both sides and said, "If only there were 2 more armrests here." Before he could finish his sentence, new green vines suddenly grew on both sides and naturally grew into 2 armrests. What's more, there were a few bright flowers on the left side of the armrests. The branches and leaves stretched out, and the fragrance of the flowers wafted. It was very pleasing to the eye. Swordsmanship placed his hand on the chair and leaned his back against the soft backrest. He sat in an imposing manner and suddenly felt that he was insufferably arrogant at this moment, as if he was above everyone else, especially when he could look at the giant in front of him without raising his head. This feeling was simply too good. It was indescribably pleasant. Now that I'm sitting and you're standing, it's clear who's superior. This is the only way to accurately reflect my position as Master Zwa. However, this method was indeed not bad. If he had such a thing at home, wouldn't it be much more convenient than a robot? It can grow at any time. Even when I'm eating, these vines can take food for me, at any time, even when I'm in the toilet. I don't have to wipe myself. Swordsmanship's imagination ran wild. That kind of life was simply, hee. Chapter 10:20. The giant looked at Swordsmanship and frowned. "This, young friend, is it convenient to talk now?" "Yes, it's convenient." Heavenly Spirit Forest? Where is that?" Swordsmanship asked. "Why does it sound so unfamiliar?" The giant's mottled face showed a trace of sadness. "Heavenly Spirit Forest is the place of the spirit race." "Spirit race? You're not tree demons or monster race." Swordsmanship was really shocked. Of course, he had heard of the spirit race. As one of the 9 native races of the astral souls, the spirit race, the Wu people, the Tao League, and the human race were all part of the astral souls. But didn't the spirit race leave the astral souls after the exile? Why was there still a spirit race here? And this was the territory of the Wu people? And why would the Umno Alliance allow the spirit race to occupy such a large territory in the Umno Alliance? He had never heard of other races in the Umno Alliance before. This matter was indeed a little unexpected. The giant's big watery eyes stared at Swordsmanship. Swordsmanship couldn't help but take a step back. After all, the giant's eyes were much bigger than his head. In the giant's watery eyes, he could clearly see his own reflection. It was even clearer than a mirror. Swordsmanship could even look into the giant's eyes and see little acne on his face. His hair had already turned white. He could squeeze it out now. He suddenly had the urge to squeeze the acne on the giant's eyes. Of course, he couldn't do that. If he sprayed the acne into the giant's eyes, the giant would probably go crazy. "Tree demons? Monster race? No, young friend, you're wrong about us. Very wrong. We're not monster race, we're spirit race. Tree demons are not the same as us. Cough, where did you come from? Why do you want to hurt us?" The giant stared at Chu Yinxing in confusion. "Our spirit race has always been at peace with the rest of the world. Even though we've been living in the Wu people's territory for thousands of years, we've never interfered with each other. But you," Swordsmanship said with a wronged expression. "Would you believe me if I said I was thrown here?" The giant hesitated for a moment. Its huge eyeballs spun like wheels before it said in a simple and honest manner, "I do." Swordsmanship was speechless. Believing everything he said? Was he that gullible? What do you want to do here? What can you do? The giant asked. The surrounding giants looked at Swishaoduo curiously. It was a rare sight. Some vines even fluttered in the air. It seemed like they had the urge to touch Swishaoduo. Two-legged beasts. How rare. What was that? It was so small. But why isn't there any tree bark on his body? This was too unsightly. The giant who was talking to Swishaoduo rolled his eyes and stopped the curious clansmen around him. Swishaoduo was speechless. I really didn't want to come here. I was thrown here by a super strong cultivator. I don't even know where this place is. Why would I take the initiative to come here? All the surrounding giants nodded in unison. They had an expression that said, "What you said makes sense. We understand everything now." Then the giant nodded in understanding and asked, "Then why did you come here?" Swishaoduo was on the verge of collapse. He realized that these big guys' brains weren't that good. They kept asking the same question over and over again, explaining each time, and asking in a different way. Can't you guys think for a second? No, I didn't want to come here. I was thrown here by someone. Swishaoduo said helplessly. Do you understand? He had an urge to go crazy. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to meet a soldier. All the giants nodded in unison. Around Swishaoduo, 7 or 8 heads nodded furiously. There were actually a lot of giants gathered here. There were at least a few hundred of them. But Swishaoduo could only see 7 or 8 of them at the front. The rest were all blocked by the giants. Those 7 or 8 heads surrounded him. They were no different from the thickest wall. Then when are you leaving? The giant in front of him asked honestly. I want to leave now, Swishaoduo said. Then you can't leave now. The giants shook their heads together. You heard us. You can't just leave like this. Then what do you want? Swishaoduo asked. The giants looked at each other. Their little fingers, which were as thick as Swishaoduo's butt, scratched their heads like a saw. Then, they looked confused and shook their heads together. You don't know what you want? And you're asking me this question? The giants were dumbfounded. They continued to scratch their heads in confusion. Crack, crack, crack. Swishaoduo sighed and used his hand to prop up his head. He weakly leaned on the thick and soft armchair. He truly felt that he had been treated courteously, and there would definitely be no conflict. This group of big guys didn't look like they were the type to fight. They probably wouldn't be able to get into a fight. But these big guys were all one-track minded. There was no way to communicate with them. I knocked a hole out of you. Yes, I admit it. But what can I do? You don't expect me to repair the hole, do you? If you were a human, I would heal you, but you are a tree. I don't know how to heal trees. If you could give me some suggestions, I would have some room to bargain. But you don't give me any direction. What do you want me to do? I might as well fight to my heart's content. Swishaoduo leaned weakly on the chair. His whole body was paralyzed. The giants stared at each other in confusion. Why did this two-legged beast suddenly stop talking? Let us think about the problem. If we could think about it, why would we ask you? This two-legged beast was a little unreasonable. He was also a little dumb. What should I do to deal with this guy? What a headache. I've never encountered such a situation before. I have no place to learn from. Let him go. That would be a loss. Not let him go. Then what should I let him do? At this moment an elegant voice said with a smile. Okay. Don't make things difficult for this little friend. Let him come over. I'll ask him. This voice was very smooth and pleasant to the ear. It had a strange rhythm. Not only did Swishaoduo and the giants understand it, but it seemed that even the dense grass on the ground understood it. They actually shook neatly. Swishaoduo stared and saw a layer of dense, grasshopper plants on the ground. The giants looked as if they had been pardoned, and hurriedly stepped aside to make a path. Then, everyone exerted their strength. The green halos flickered one by one. The 2 vines on the armchair that Swishaoduo was sitting on grew all the way under it. They carried Swishaoduo and grew crazily. They actually grew for more than 2,000 meters, and steadily carried the armchair that Swishaoduo was sitting on to the front of a flower bed. They actually forgot that Swishaoduo could walk on his own. They obediently grew Swishaoduo over. Swishaoduo looked around. The surrounding trees were shady. and the sky was completely covered. Below there was a flower bed. The flowers in the flower bed were like satin blooming brightly. It was extremely dazzling. Immediately after, the completely intact flower wall suddenly split into two, without a sound in the field of flowers as far as the eye can see. There was an entrance. Shuo looked around, and saw that there was a flower room inside. It was a flower room made completely of flowers. A white-robed old man with white hair, white beard, and white eyebrows was looking at Shuo with a smile. "Young friend, you have come from afar. What a rare guest. Please come in and have a chat." The old man's voice was clear and elegant. It made people feel comfortable from the bottom of their hearts. Shuo stood at the entrance of the flower bed. He frowned and said uncertainly, "Spirit race?" The old man smiled faintly and nodded. "Yes, I am from the spirit race. In fact, I may be the only pure-blooded spirit race person in this world." He looked at Shuo and said, "If I am not wrong, although this is the continent of the Wu people, you are a human and not a Wu people." "Yes, I am a human." Shuo was very polite and said obediently, "Senior, nice to meet you." After confirming the other party's identity, he immediately changed his attitude. Just by listening to the old man's words, he knew that this old man was an old monster, who had lived for who knew how many years. His strength was absolutely terrifying. At the very least, he was at the level of a current giant. At the very least, with his current strength, he definitely could not deal with him. Not to mention that he had the entire forest behind him. How could he be a match for him with his weak arms and weak legs? Since he was not strong enough, he had to be obedient. Therefore, Shuo's mouth was immediately smeared with honey. "Senior's style is truly admirable. Good style, good manners. Just by looking at you, Senior, I can already imagine how outstanding the spirit race was back in the day. It is a pity that this junior was born a few 100,000 years too late. It is a pity that I was not able to witness the spirit race's style." As he spoke, he walked quickly into the flower bed. After Shuo entered, the flowers on the left side of the entrance automatically closed and covered the entrance. Then, Shuo found that the place he was in had changed its appearance. It was no longer a simple flower bed. At this moment, what came into view was a very ordinary-looking farmyard. There were 3 thatched cottages, a courtyard, mud walls, a small door, and even a small toilet. In the courtyard, there was a small tea table with a small teapot and 2 small teacups on it. Only the old man in white looked the same as before. He was making tea and entertaining guests. Opposite the old man, there was a small chair. "Honorable guest, please sit." The old man had a kind expression. His white eyebrows almost reached the corners of his mouth. They fluttered in the wind, looking extremely elegant. Shuo smiled kindly and innocently. He sat across from the old man and said, "Senior, what is your name? You're really in a good mood, spending your days leisurely in this forest by yourself. This kind of carefreeness, this kind of self-cultivation, this kind of temperament. I admire you to the extreme." Chapter 10:21. He gave a thumbs up and said, "You're a wise man with great magnanimity. This is how it should be, how it should be. I'm really envious of you." The old man chuckled and said, "Since you're so envious, why don't you stay here with me and spend your days leisurely? Wouldn't that be great?" "Ah." Shuo was dumbfounded and shook his head like a rattledrum. No, I'm still young. How can I live such a life? Please don't make fun of me." The old man smiled faintly and said, "You're right. You're still very young." It was clearly a very common phrase, but this old man actually made it sound very meaningful and lingered in the air. Shuo smiled but didn't say anything else. "Distinguished guest, please have some tea." The old man picked up the teapot and poured tea. There was a nostalgic look in his eyes as he said slowly, "Since I can remember things, you're the second person to come here." Shuo picked up the teacup and thanked him first. "Thank you very much. Good tea. I wonder who your first guest is. Cough cough. What tea is this?" The moment the tea entered his mouth, Shuo's face changed greatly. His eyes widened and were full of disbelief. The tea flowed down his throat, into his stomach, and then into his stomach. Zhuo only felt that his whole body had fallen into a state of laziness. Then the feeling spread from his meridians to his meridians. It was an indescribable comfort and smoothness. This was a completely unfamiliar energy. At least, Zhuo had never seen it before. It wasn't spiritual power, mental strength, or vitality. It wasn't any of the known forms of energy, but it was an extremely special and beneficial energy. At this moment, Zhuo was so comfortable that he almost moaned. He tried his best to hold it back, but he could still clearly feel that his meridians were nourished by the warm energy of the tea. Even many peripheral nerves, which should have been worn out or slowed due to cultivation, were all revitalized at this moment. Although this kind of energy was completely foreign and unknown, it was obviously filled with great benefits. Zhuo licked his lips and smacked his lips. The way he looked at the teapot suddenly became heated. The old man smiled faintly and said, "These are just some small trinkets. Please accept them as a token of my respect. If you find them acceptable, why don't you take some with you when you leave?" "All right." Zhuo agreed without hesitation, and did not hold back at all. "Such good things, even if you give me more, I won't complain about it. Only a hypocrite would pretend to be polite. I won't pretend to be hypocritical. If you give me something, I'll accept it." The old man pondered for a moment, then lowered his head, and continued to make tea. A sad look gradually appeared on his face as he said, "Young friend, you must have come this time because of Zhu Rong, right?" Zhuo was shocked. His expression became more respectful as he said, "You even know about this. You are indeed an expert and knowledgeable senior." The old man shook his head gently. His face was full of indescribable melancholy as he said, "I knew it. This is what we agreed on back then." What we agreed on back then. This time, Zhuo was even more shocked. For a moment he didn't know what to say. This old man made an appointment with Zhu Rong today? Is this possible? But if this old man was telling the truth, then how old was this old man in front of him? More than tens of thousands of years old. Maybe hundreds of thousands of years old, or even millions of years old. This old man's lifespan is too long. The old man smiled faintly. The melancholy on his face only appeared for a moment, before it quickly disappeared. He poured another cup of tea for Zhuo. His white eyebrows moved slightly as he said calmly, "Young friend, since you have received Zhu Rong's inheritance, and came here personally, you don't have to leave in a hurry. I wonder if you are interested in listening to a story while sipping your tea?" "Senior, this junior is all ears." Zhuo responded even more obediently. He sat in an extremely well-behaved manner with his shoulders and back straight. In the face of this old monster, a super old monster who had the status and qualifications to make an appointment with Zhu Rong, and was still alive until now, the only things Zhuo could do was to be as obedient as possible. He couldn't afford to offend this old man. This old man was very likely the first person in the 3 continents under the starry sky that he couldn't afford to offend, right? Previously, there was a person in charge of the Wu people who came to this place. He was also the first person I mentioned, and his name was Hong Miao. This person was able to come here by chance. He lost his way during his training, and came here by chance. At that time, Hong Miao was only a young man, and his strength was only so. The old man said calmly. He went deep into the forest, and was chased by the masters of the demon clan, and the demon clan. He was severely injured and panicked. He accidentally entered the heavenly spirit forest and was sent here by those big guys. Then he received Zhu Wu's inheritance from me. He felt that the sword Dao was lacking in murderous aura, and it was difficult for it to be compatible with him. Thus, he collected the essence of the void from me, and made 2 big hammers before he left. Since then, no one else has entered the heavenly spirit forest until now. Compared to you, Hong Miao was able to come here because of fate. He was driven into a corner not because of his ability, but because of his luck. But you, my young friend, belong to the restriction that was agreed upon long ago. After you received Zhu Rong's inheritance, you were sent here. The old man smiled faintly and said, "Therefore, the two of you are very different." Zhou Xiaoduo was stunned. Hong Miao? Who was Hong Miao? Logically speaking, someone who was able to obtain such a peerless heavenly fate and leave this old man's place with great gains should not be an ordinary person. He should be famous. However, no matter how hard Zhou Xiaoduo searched through his memories, read any books, and heard of countless legends, he still couldn't find any trace of Hong Miao being related to him. The only reasonable guess was that the old man had mentioned 2 big hammers just now, so this Hong Miao should be famous for his big hammers. Could he be the invincible Great Flood sorcerer? However, this was only Zhou Xiaoduo's guess. There was no evidence to prove it. Naturally, he wouldn't say it out loud. He just pretended to casually pick up his teacup and drink his tea respectfully. He took advantage of the old man openly and continued to listen to the story. It's been a long time, really a long time. The old man raised his head slightly, as if he was deep in thought and reminiscing. Zhou Xiaoduo suddenly thought of something and blurted out. Hong Miao went deep into the forest and finally entered the heavenly spirit forest because he was chased by the masters of the demon clan and the demon clan. There are still demon clan and the demon clan in this forest? The old man's thoughts were interrupted by his words. He frowned and said, "Isn't this a very normal thing? Don't be impatient. I'll sort out what happened back then. It's really too long ago. It's a little blurry." As he spoke, he glanced at Zhou Xiaoduo and said, "Be quiet. Don't interrupt." Zhou Xiaoduo nodded obediently and sat upright. He picked up his teacup and drank his tea cutely with a serious face. That was 100,000. 20. No, how many years ago? It's really too blurry. The old man calculated and finally gave up. He said, "Days pass here. Sometimes I sleep for a few years or even decades. I have little contact with the outside world. I really don't know how many years have passed. There's no time in the mountains, and time passes in the forest." His words were full of disappointment. Zhou Xiaoduo secretly clicked his tongue and drank his tea obediently. He said, "That's not important. You have a long life. Time passes by. It's just a trivial matter." The old man nodded. "That's right. It's not important. It's really trivial. I remember that time. I suddenly gained spiritual intelligence. It was His Majesty Spirit Emperor who casually enlightened me." The old man said, "I still remember that after His Majesty enlightened me, the first thing I heard when I gained spiritual intelligence was His Majesty Spirit Emperor's faint surprise. He said, 'Hey, this grasshopper plant has such a strong fate. It's really unexpected.'" Gulp. Zhou Xiaoduo almost spat out the mouthful of tea with great willpower. He forcefully swallowed it down, causing his stomach to churn for a while. He almost laughed out loud. "Grasshopper plant? If I'm not wrong, it should be purslane? The original body of this kind old man in front of me is actually this? You really can't judge a book by its cover. The sea can't be measured with a pint pot. However, whether it's grasshopper plant or purslane, they should be the most common wild vegetables, right? Well, it's probably because he gained wisdom overnight, plus countless years of training and tempering. Isn't there a saying that standing in the wind, pigs can also fly? Zhou Xiaoduo looked obedient on the surface, but his mind was filthy. "I still remember that back then, it was a great war between the 9 races. They attacked each other, causing the world to lose its color and the sun and moon to dim." The old man said, full of memories. "First, it was the dragons, phoenixes, Chilants, and 3,000 demon gods. They fought so hard that the world was worried, and the living creatures were silent. Later on, the demon race took advantage of the situation and rose. The 2 demon emperors unified the demon court and called themselves the Heavenly Court. They stood above all the other races and looked down on their peers. Compared to the demon race, who was at the peak of their power, the other races were indeed slightly weaker, or more than one level. For example, the demon race rashly intervened in the Dragon Han calamity. Countless elites of their race died. But they were not angry that the demon race stood at the peak of the heavens. They fought with the demon race, and were the most miserable. They were almost beaten to a pulp. Only the Tao race could contend with them. As for the others, Even the Western race was defeated repeatedly and did not dare to invade the borders again. After that war, the spirit race retreated into the forest of 10,000 spirits and hid from the world. Then, the Wu people fought against the heavens with the earth and fought with the demon race for the lead of the world. They really fought until the world was shattered and the sun and moon withered. Then for some reason, the demon race, the Western race, the spirit race, the soul race, the human race, and others were also involved. At the start of the war, this old man was only a small blade of grass that had just gained sentience. But one day, just as the spirit race was about to enter the war, His Majesty, the Spirit Emperor, suddenly summoned me. At that time, His Majesty the Spirit Emperor was with Water Wizard Lord Gonggong and Earth Wizard Lord Hutu. Chapter 1022. Lord Spirit Emperor, Lord Zhuwu Gonggong, Lord Zhuwu Hutu. Zhuo was filled with respect when he heard that. His mouth was dry, and he could not help but drink another large cup of water to suppress his shock. His back could not help but straighten. The old man's gaze was very distant as he slowly said, "So it was these three supreme beings who worked together to calculate the calamity of this battle. It was a calamity of the world, a calamity of the earth. However, they were powerless to break the situation because even the three of them were trapped in the calamity and couldn't escape. Their own luck had already merged with the great calamity. At that time, the Demon Emperor's 10th prince was wreaking havoc in the world, causing suffering and suffering. The Wu people were already secretly plotting to eliminate him in one fell swoop. However, eliminating the 10th prince would definitely arouse the Demon Emperor's anger. Once the Demon Emperor was angry, the world would definitely be turned upside down. This battle would eventually turn into a catastrophe, causing the world to be reshuffled. In order to stop the source of this catastrophe, Lord Water Shaman had already quarreled with the Fire Shaman many times. But in the end he could not stop it. The entire Wu people were united in fighting. War with the demon race was already imperative. The only difference was whether it was sooner or later. Water Shaman and Lord Zhuwu Hutu pried into the secrets of the heavens. After paying a huge price, they obtained a premonition that once the war began, all living beings would be plunged into misery and suffering. All races would be wiped out, and the earth would suffer a calamity. However, the other Zhuwu Hutu thought that his strength was invincible in the world. He thought that using this battle to overthrow the demon court and rule the world was inevitable. He did not listen to the two Zhuwu Hutu and insisted on fighting. It was also at this time that Lord Water and Lord Water secretly came to find His Majesty Spirit Emperor and told him a method. They hoped that the grass spirit of the spirit clan, which was aloof from worldly affairs, would be involved in the great calamity. They would use the spiritual being with the weakest cultivation and the least backlash from the heavenly Tao to stir up this world-destroying calamity, hoping that the heavenly Tao would be merciful and leave a chance of survival. His Majesty Spirit Emperor was silent for a long time before he finally agreed. However, he smiled and said, "Even so, the Spirit Clan and the Wu people will definitely be punished by the heavens for interfering with the heavenly Tao and messing with the heavenly Tao. In the future, I'm afraid the two races will not be able to survive." However, the Water Wizard and the ancestor of sorcery Hutu were very insistent. They said that as long as the human world survives and the world is not destroyed, living beings can reproduce, and all things can survive. What's wrong with you and me dying? The old man's eyebrows fluttered in the wind. His expression was one of frustration and apprehension, but most of it was one of excitement. These were the emotions that overflowed when he was reminiscing. Back then, as the weakest spiritual being in the world, it was actually able to meet the supreme emperor of its own race, as well as the almighty beings of other races. How could it not be nervous and excited? And then, Zhuo was so engrossed in the story that he couldn't help but ask. After that, we worked together to formulate a plan. And then, the battle began. The old man sighed softly and said, "At the beginning of the battle, the god of war of the Wu people, Zhu Wu, the great Yi, came out of the race. He used his body to manifest the will of the heavens, and his soul to incinerate the mysteries of the heavens. He stood above the clouds and stepped on the peak of Buzhou. He drew the bow of chaos and shot the heavenly arrows. He turned all his cultivation into 10 arrows, chasing the sun and setting the sun. Wherever the 10 arrows passed, they hit the target. The 10 princes of the demon clan were all shot down to the dust. The 10 arrows were mighty. They broke the demon's body, shattered the demon's soul, and destroyed the foundation. The 10 princes of the demon clan were all about to be killed on the spot. At the right time, the heavens and the earth were silent, and everything was silent. Swordsmanship suddenly felt his blood boiling. He didn't dare to breathe, and waited with bated breath. Wasn't this the legend of Yi shooting down the 9 suns? But according to the old man, the 10 arrows controlled the heavens and hit the target. Shouldn't the 10 suns be destroyed? How could there be one more day left? It was also at that time, when I was still a grass, I scattered all my spiritual energy in the vast heavens and earth. The land thousands of miles under Buzhou Mountain was full of my clones. Thousands of miles were boundless. There were wild grasses and grasshoppers everywhere. What's more, all the wild grasses and grasshoppers reversed their vitality and transported it to the extreme. They absorbed the power of the earth and bloomed toward the sky, deriving infinite vitality. With the infinite vitality as a screen, the last remnant souls of the 10 princes of the demon clan were able to shelter under my body. Even though Zhu Wu, the great Yi, used the demon god's eye to search, he couldn't find the remnant souls of the 10 princes. In the end, he took the bow and left, but he didn't complete the task. The 10 princes of the demon clan survived because of this. But also because of this, the war of witches and demons broke out. The great tribulation of heaven and earth began, but it was no longer a calamity of destruction. There was a hint of vitality hidden in it. The old man's face was full of reminiscence. Before this, the 2 lords of water and earth promised me that I would live forever in the heavens and earth, and nothing would hurt me. I would be born when there was soil, and I would live when there was water. After that, the demon king also promised me that as long as the heat didn't extinguish, the yang fire wouldn't hurt me. He would benefit the world and benefit the people. At this point, the old man breathed a sigh of relief and fell into a trance. Swordsmanship couldn't help but think of the legend of porcelain among the people. This magical wild herb was so weak that it would break with a touch. Its roots were not developed, and its leaves and stems were like a bag of water. It could be said to be extremely weak. However, such a weak porcelain would not die no matter how hot the summer was. Even if it was pulled up by the roots and hung on a rope for a few days under the sun, until it was like charcoal. As long as it was thrown on the ground and saw the soil, it would come back to life in a day or two and regain its green color. If it was nourished by rain, it could spread out a large area in a few days. Even if it was hung on a rope, as long as there was enough dust floating over, it could still survive if its roots were touched by it. It was really magical. It was said that during the famine years, this kind of wild herb was not poisonous, and even had a lot of nutrients. It was enough to be eaten to alleviate hunger. No one knew how many lives it had saved. If it wasn't for the fact that it didn't taste good, it would have become a common dish on the table. Could it be that the real reason was the blessing given by the top leaders of the witches and demons? In the legend, the catastrophe of witches and demons was first triggered by that battle. The demon king knew that the Wu people blocked the heavenly secret and shot the princes, so he was furious. He launched the demon court to attack the Wu people. The war started. As for the sorcerer tribe, they were well prepared. A long and drawn-out great war of heaven and earth began. At first, the 2 sides were evenly matched. They fought fiercely until His Majesty Dong Huang suddenly entered the battle with a strange army. He killed Zhu Wu and De Yi, causing the Wu people's 12 citadel heaven formation to be incomplete. The Wu people fell into a disadvantage, and the scales of victory began to tilt. Then, the princes of the spirits and demons were killed by a tyrannical force when they passed by a certain battlefield. The mastermind was vaguely pointed to the top leaders of the demon race. The princess royal of the spirits and the third disciple of the western spirits, Golden Cicada, also died, causing the situation to become even more out of control. This led to a series of investigations, but for some reason, it turned into a war between the 9 races. A long and drawn-out war. In that war, not only did the most powerful Wu people and the demon race suffer great losses, the other races were almost completely wiped out. Our spirit race was no exception. His Majesty, the Spirit Emperor, was seriously injured by the Demon Empress. It is said that the top figures of each race, and many powerful figures, also fell in that war. In the end, all the races suffered great losses. They no longer had the power to reform the world. They could only retreat with hatred and recuperate. However, at that time, another unforeseen event occurred. In the end, the 6 races were separated from the continent and drifted in the stars. The old man sighed softly. This is what happened in the past. Shuo sensed that something was wrong. 6 races? Aren't there 8 clans? Because at that time, there were still 2 clans left. However, after an unknown number of years, just like the previous 6 clans, they split up and evolved into the 8 clans outside. However, after the Great War of the Shamans and Demons, only 6 clans left, or rather were expelled. The old man smiled bitterly and said, "This is what I experienced. How can it be false?" Shuo suddenly felt dizzy. But it was because of this unforeseen event that I gained an extremely powerful fate. This is called the merit of saving the world. At that time, I didn't know the reason. After all, no matter how powerful the fate was, it was nothing to the weeds. But one day, Zuwu Zhurong suddenly came to find me. He pulled me out of the ground and brought me to Mount Buzhou. Shuo coughed. He felt that Zuwu Zhurong was really something. I came to find you, pulled you out of the ground and left. If that's the case, you're lying in the ground while I'm standing? How can that be? On Mount Buzhou, Lord Zhurong used my soul as a guide to predict the future. After a while he laughed and said, "I guessed right. This bunch of weeds of yours really has a great fate. In the future, it will spread to the whole world. It's really a powerful fate that can reach both the past and the present. Since that's the case, I need your help." The old man smiled bitterly and said, "At that time, I was held in the palm of Lord Zhurong's hand and exposed to the sun for 7 days and 7 nights. When I was dazed from the sun, he gave me something wrapped in true fire and said, 'If I throw someone over, he'll be my successor. You have to give this to him. If there's no one, you have to swallow it yourself. Consider it my compensation for using your fate.'" Cough, cough, cough. Shuo coughed. He was really stunned by Zuwu Zhurong's actions. Even if he was just listening, he was still dumbfounded. He even felt a little cramped. You almost dried a bunch of weeds under the sun, and then threw a ball of fire onto it. And then you asked them to preserve this ball of fire for you. Let a bunch of withered weeds preserve a ball of true fire. Cough, cough. This action made Shuo's balls cramp. Even after it was preserved for a certain period of time, and no one came to take it, this ball of fire will be used as compensation. How can a bunch of weeds swallow a ball of fire? This action is truly well understood. There's no one else in history who can do this. But the most ridiculous thing is that this bunch of weeds actually managed to preserve it until now. They're all talents. Shuo sighed. He prostrated himself in admiration. Chapter 1023. It had been kept until now. Didn't that mean that it was going to be handed over to him? Wait, if he didn't see it, the old man could swallow the genuine fire as compensation. Now that he had seen it, the genuine fire and its contents would be handed over to him. But didn't that mean that he would have to pay for it? Shuo was indeed worthy of his reputation. His focus was always different from most people. When it came to the exchange of wealth, he would be particularly attentive. After all, he was a genuine Pishio. the kind that could only get in and not get out. The old man smiled bitterly. Master Zhu Rong really thinks highly of me. After all, I'm just a blade of grass. No matter how high my cultivation is, I'm still just a blade of grass. How could I swallow his genuine fire? How could he say that if no one came to find me, I would swallow it myself? I can only keep waiting for a very long time. Master Zhu Rong said that if no one came to find me, and I couldn't swallow the fire, I would let the fire swallow me. The old man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He couldn't bear to look back. Ahem. Zhuo also felt as if 10,000 beasts had just galloped through a public toilet after a rainstorm. Zhu Rong was really a genius. The old man sighed even more. It's not over yet. When it was finally over, Lord Zhu Rong threw me to the ground and left. We were in Mount Buzhou just now. How could I absorb the abundant power of the earth at will? It was a pity that I struggled for a long time, and finally found some ordinary soil. After recovering my mobility, I used my soul power to wrap Lord Zhu Rong's true fire of inheritance. Later, as my cultivation improved day by day, I could finally try to use the power of Mount Buzhou and reproduce bit by bit at the foot of the mountain. However, when I returned to the flat ground, I didn't know how many years had passed. At that time, the battle of the liches and demons was coming to an end. I used the earth energy of Mount Buzhou and worked hard to improve myself. Finally, I was able to derive a little bit of genuine spirit energy and made contact with His Majesty Spirit Emperor. But His Majesty Spirit Emperor was already seriously injured at that time. He felt that the catastrophe between heaven and earth was coming to an end, and that there were more masters above the heavenly Tao coming. In the end, His Majesty Spirit Emperor told me that this time, the Spirit Clan was really going to leave this world. After that, in the vast starry sky, no one knew if they could return after thousands of years. But on this continent, there was still one last Spirit Clan descendant. At that time, I was still confused. I didn't realize that the last Spirit Clan descendant that His Majesty Spirit Emperor was talking about was actually me. Spirit Emperor, His Majesty said, "My child, you have saved the lives of hundreds of millions of people in this world, and you have done a lot of good deeds. You also have the favor of the Spirit Emperor, the blessings of the two ancestor magi, and now, you have the trust of Zhu Rong ancestor magi. Therefore you can't leave. At that time, I'll leave this forest for you alone. You can wait there for your destined one. If you leave with us, it's because the heavenly Tao didn't mean it. If you don't leave, it's because there's a mission for you to wait. Then you can wait." Then His Majesty Spirit Emperor left a few words for me and left. Now I still remember them clearly. They were, don't leave, give birth to this world, and let the flowers of all worlds bloom." Zhuo pondered over these words. He felt a little enlightened, but when he thought about it carefully, he didn't seem to understand anything. Since then I've been here, constantly using the wind to spread my descendants. Until now, even I don't know how many descendants I have out there. Every year, I spread out billions of seeds. I just hope to achieve what His Majesty Spirit Emperor said. Let the flowers of all worlds bloom. The old man sighed softly. Zhuo felt a surge of emotion in his chest. He couldn't help but say, "You've already done it. Your descendants have already spread across the 3 continents. Inside and outside the 7 seas, in the mountains and deserts. Under the heavens, wherever the sun shines, your descendants will be there. Even when the world was turned upside down, and the world was in great calamity, and people were in misery and suffering, your descendants not only lived for a long time, but also saved countless lives. It's far from enough to say that your descendants are in the hundreds of millions. Since ancient times, you've saved trillions of lives. You've benefited the world and helped the people. You fully deserved it. You've also achieved the let the flowers of all worlds bloom." Zhuo said with admiration. "Your life's great wish has already been achieved. Now many places in the outside world are flourishing. There's more and more food, and people don't have to eat porcelain anymore. But your legend is still circulating among the people." The old man's eyes were filled with gratification. He said softly, So, I'm called Purslin in the outside world? I didn't know until now that I've always known that I was called Grasshopper. Swordsmanship took a deep breath. Although you and your descendants were not the only ones who saved the people during the famine, no one can take away your achievements and your good deeds. Sorry for the disrespect, big brother. Swordsmanship bowed respectfully. It was only at this moment that this bow came from the bottom of his heart. Facing such an old man who had contributed to the people of the continent all his life, no one could not be respectful. Not even an inch. Never leave. Give birth to a lifetime. Let the flowers of all worlds bloom. Swordsmanship's heart was in turmoil. It was indescribable. It's my duty, it's my duty. The old man smiled kindly. This is my mission. I'm only afraid that I haven't done enough. How can I thank you? You've done enough. I believe that the people of the continent will remember you and thank you. Swordsmanship said seriously. I think that with what you've done, you should become a sage. You should become a sage. These 5 words made the old man's heart palpitate with fear. He trembled and his eyes widened. At this moment, the sound of thunder suddenly appeared in the 9 heavens. The rumbling sound of thunder rumbled in the clouds above the 9 heavens, as if they were queuing up for a journey. It rumbled and rolled across the sky until a very long time later, before it slowly disappeared. The human world was once again filled with sunset. Colorful clouds covered the sky. On the shore of the West Sea, suddenly, a huge wave rose up. A huge toad, almost as big as the Thousand Village, rose up from the sea. Its body was surrounded by huge silver waves, and it soared into the sky. The entire West Sea was also surging with waves, clamoring and surging. The giant toad somersaulted in the air, and transformed into a red-robed Taoist with a transcendent air. A bright and dazzling red cloud suddenly appeared in the sky, surging and churning. The Taoist in red looked disappointed and angry. He looked at the sky and tried to control his emotions. He asked softly, in my previous life, I didn't have a stable footing. I didn't do things secretly. I revealed the secrets of heaven and offended others. Karma went round and round. In the end I died. In this life, I've never harmed the lives of ants. I've never dared to speak a single word. And I've never suffered the slightest bit of evil karma. Finally, I have hope of attaining the Tao. But this time, who was it that stole my destiny and stole my Tao fruit? Why don't I have a chance in this life? Why? After 10 million years of cultivation I died. After another 10 million years of cultivation someone stole it. Why is that? Why is that? The heavenly Tao is unfair. The red-robed Taoist looked at the sky and asked softly. In the sky, the thunder was still faintly discernible. It seemed to be an answer, but it didn't seem to be. The red-robed Taoist waited for a long time. The thunder in the sky was already far away, but he still stood there in a daze and didn't move for a long time. His face was full of confusion. He kept muttering to himself. Why? Why? Who can give me a reason? But he didn't get an answer. In the distance, the wind and clouds rose. The West Sea Great Shaman came over as fast as lightning. Senior Chan Sheng. The West Sea Great Shaman cupped his fists and bowed. Why are you in the mood to come out today? The West Sea Great, which said this out of politeness. He didn't expect Chan Sheng to answer anything. Since Chan Sheng appeared in the West Sea, he hadn't said a word. He hadn't opened his mouth at all. Even if he took the initiative to show up this time, he still didn't change his original intention. Maybe it was just to say hello. And then Lord Chan Sheng went back to cultivate in seclusion. Sometimes, the West Sea Great Shaman didn't understand. You just cultivated silently like this, but never went out. Even if you cultivated to be invincible in the world and supreme in the region. What's the use? But he wasn't Chan Sheng. Naturally, he didn't understand the original intention of cultivation, and he didn't dare to ask in detail. Because the West Sea Great Shaman knew that Chan Sheng's cultivation was very high. He could be said to be an extremely terrible existence in this world. He was definitely not a match for him. Moreover, it was still unknown whether or not the Flood Boss was a match for this Toad Saint. The West Sea Great Shaman was already very satisfied that Chan Sheng was stable and didn't stir up trouble in his territory. How could he rashly make trouble? Hearing the West Sea Great Shaman's question, Chan Sheng slowly turned his head and said lightly, "Tell me, why can't I become a saint?" The West Sea Great Shaman was shocked when he heard this. He really didn't expect Chan Sheng to open his mouth. And the moment he opened his mouth, he asked such a high-end question. Why can't you become a saint? For me, this problem is simply too far away. I'm still working hard to break through to the level of sage to be. Well, strictly speaking, according to the ancient times, I'm now working hard to break through to the peak of zenith heaven. That you actually asked me why can't I become a saint? If I could answer this question, wouldn't I also? The West Sea Great Shaman actually felt a little inferior because of this question. I'm a little tired. I beg for monthly votes. I'm going home to eat. Chapter 1024. The West Sea Shaman's thoughts were very complicated. Obviously, he was confused by this sudden question, and even felt inferior. Damn it, did all the powerful people talk like this? He even felt a little autistic. He felt that his self-esteem had been seriously hurt. Well, I'm inexperienced. I really can't answer, the West Sea Shaman said hesitantly. Inexperienced? How long had it been since he used this word to describe himself? The red-robed Taoist Chan Sheng was silent for a long time before he said, I heard that the Flood Witch of the Wu people has inherited the legacy of Gong Gong, and she has dabbled in the legacy of Zhu Rong. She is recognized as invincible in this world, right? The West Sea Shaman said proudly, Senior, what you said is true. I, the Flood Boss, am indeed invincible in this world. Puff. Chan Sheng exhaled a breath of air from his nostrils. Although he didn't say it explicitly, the meaning of if the tiger doesn't show its head, the monkey will be king was obvious. A strong sense of disdain and sarcasm suddenly filled the air. When the West Sea Shaman heard this puff, he immediately felt insulted. In an instant, his face and neck turned red, and the unique temper of the Wu people suddenly rushed up. He stared at Fang Qi and asked, Senior, what do you mean? When his temper rose, he didn't care whether he was a saint or not. Even if he exploded, he would splash his blood all over. How dare you insult my boss? Damn it! Chan Sheng's face changed, and he became extremely regretful. Then he raised his hand and slapped himself in the face. This slap was extremely heavy, he said angrily. In your previous life, you offended people because of your words, and you were infected with inexplicable karma, which led to your death. In this life, you still don't know how to repent. With your temperament, you deserve to be unable to become a saint and lose your Tao. Seeing this, the West Sea Shaman was stunned and didn't know how to react for a long time. What was going on? At this moment, suddenly, another figure floated out of Chan Sheng's body. His face was full of shame as he said, I was wrong. Chan Sheng's face was filled with anger and regret, while the other Chan Sheng's face was filled with regret and shame. The West Sea Grand Magus groaned in his stomach. He only felt that his anger was suddenly stuck in his throat, unable to be released. I understand now. No wonder this Chan Sheng never spoke to anyone his whole life. It turned out that he had another companion. From the looks of it, he was actually able to chat with his clone every day with relish. The West Sea Great Witch's mind was filled with thoughts. He didn't know if this Chan Sheng would summon a few doppelgangers to play a game, or something when he was lonely. For example, the Astral Souls invented a very fun game called Do Diju, Level Up, Mahjong, and so on. Why would they be so happy when they bet against themselves? I misspoke. The previous Chan Sheng said to the West Sea Great Witch, Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. I don't dare. Senior is too polite. The West Sea Great Witch's anger also disappeared. As a senior, he had already apologized in person. What else do you want? If you continue to be pretentious, you don't want face. At this time, the other Chan Sheng also said, It's my fault. My Tao heart was biased for a moment. It's all my fault. Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. Did he have to apologize to each person once? The West Sea Great Witch replied again, I don't dare. Senior is too polite. But later the Chan Sheng said, However, I don't know if your Flood Witch is so invincible in the world. I wonder how her combat power is compared to the 12 Zhu Wu of the Wu people. The West Sea Great Witch was stunned and said, "She is far inferior." This was the truth. Although the Flood Witch was powerful, she was still far behind the 12 Zhu Wu. Although the West Sea Great Witch was a little angry, he had to tell the truth. The Changsheng said again, "Compared to Donghuang, Tai Yi, Demon Emperor Di Jun, how are these people?" "Not as good." The West Sea Great Witch answered honestly, but the anger in his heart was surging. What did he mean? "Compared to Yuanshi, how is Tongtian?" The Changsheng asked again. "Still not as good." The West Sea Great Witch was a little angry. "Qi." The Changsheng's nostrils flared again. The meaning was very clear. How dare he claim to be the best in the world, when he couldn't beat this and that? The Changsheng's face suddenly changed and he said angrily, "You!" In the end, this Toad Saint's face was filled with shame. He slapped his own mouth and said, "I was wrong. I didn't change my nature. My Tao heart is biased. I will go in right now." After that, his body floated and merged with the original Changsheng again, never to come out again. The Changsheng sighed deeply and said, "Fellow Taoist, sorry to offend you." The West Sea Great Witch was about to get angry, but the guy was gone. He could only say bitterly, "It's okay." For a moment he felt a little out of his mind. There was a feeling of drawing out a knife in anger, but there was nothing in front of him. He had nowhere to use his strength. "Fellow Taoist, please tell me where your boss Flood is now," the Changsheng asked. "Well, my boss Flood is now in seclusion. I'm afraid it's difficult to receive you." The West Sea Great Witch's face changed. "Well, I know. I'll find another opportunity myself." The Changsheng sighed softly and said, "Goodbye. I'm indebted to the West Sea for taking care of me for many years. In the future, I'll have an explanation." "Sir, where are you going?" The West Sea Great Witch was shocked. "The opportunity has passed. It's meaningless to stay here. There are 3,000 great Taos. Although they are all rugged and difficult to traverse, there will always be other paths ahead." The red-robed Taoist said softly, "The mountains and rivers are so big. I want to take a look." Then he said softly, "Goodbye." His body did not move, but a white cloud rose from under his feet. It leisurely carried his body and soared into the sky, galloping into the distance. The West Sea Great Witch watched the Changsheng leave, and could not help but frown. This existence had been silently cultivating here, for hundreds of thousands of years. Today, for some unknown reason, he had actually left just like that on a whim? The West Sea Great Witch was furious. However, what this fellow said was really right. It was fine if he did not open his mouth, but once he opened his mouth, it was really infuriating. If he spoke like that normally, it would be better if he did not open his mouth, because no matter how many lives he had, he would be beaten to death sooner or later. How could he be so infuriating? Although my boss Flood is the leader of the Great Witches, he is still just a Great Witch. How dare he ask me if I can compare with Zhu Wu? This is bullshit. If we were at that level, we would not be called Great Witches, okay? How dare he ask us to compare with Demon Emperor, Donghuang, Yuanshi and Tongtian? Is there a need to ask? Is there a need to ask? At the end of the sentence, the sound made me so angry that I almost self-destructed. Damn it. What a bastard. He picked up the phone and dialed. "This is the West Sea. Well, tell Boss Flood that there is a hateful red-robed Taoist. He is Changsheng from the West Sea. He will probably go to discuss Tao with him. Tell Boss to be careful. This fellow's cultivation is ridiculously high, and his mouth is also extremely annoying. Tell Boss to be careful and deal with him carefully. If he can't deal with him, summon our brothers to go over and kill him together. Call me first." "Well, okay." Then, the West Sea Great Witch turned around and left. "Is Hai Hunshan back? Did he find him?" On the other side, in the dense forest, in the straw hut, Zhuo and the old man sat opposite each other. The atmosphere was unprecedentedly harmonious. Zhuo kept calling the old man senior, and even poured tea for him. He was very attentive. However, in the time it took for the old man to drink 1 cup, he had to drink at least 3 or 4 cups. Until now, He had drunk so much that his stomach was slightly bloated. But he still kept drinking. This water was really good stuff. He did not know when he would be able to drink it again. He must not waste it. Now that he could drink more, he had to drink as much as he could. What's your name? The old man asked kindly. My name is Zhuo. Zhuo showed a harmless smile. This name? Haha. The old man smiled. It's full of childish charm. Ahem. Yes. Senior, I wonder if it's convenient for you to give me your name? Zhuo finally asked. The old man's face showed a grateful expression. Back then, His Majesty the Spirit Emperor gave me a name. I'm called Wanqingsheng. Wanqingsheng, Zhuo could not help but praise. Wanqingsheng, this name is really good. Buddha is born in all homes. All people are born because of this. I don't dare to be called Buddha. The old man hurriedly waved his hand and refused, saying, the title of Buddha is an honorific of the Western clan. I'm from the Spirit clan. I don't dare to be called Buddha. Elder Wan, you just said that there are still demon clans and devil clans in this heavenly spirit forest? Zhuo asked. Yes. Wanqingsheng said. This is the territory of the Spirit clan. If you walk further out, it's the territory of the demon clan. And then in the opposite direction, it's the territory of the devil clan. Back then, when the boundless mighty force split the Yuanzhou mainland, because this old man was protected by the heavenly way's luck, the karma of living beings was entangled. It can be said that the heavens borrowed the power to preserve this forest. This place is a place shared by all living beings, not just one clan or one bloodline. A long time ago, this forest was called the Demon Spirit Forest or the Demon Spirit Forest, not the Heavenly Spirit Forest. It was not until the continent split that it changed its name to the Heavenly Spirit Forest. Both the demon race and the demon race live in this forest. However, the ancestors of the two races probably knew that it was the heavenly Tao that allowed this forest to be preserved in the first place. Therefore, they would not come here for no reason. The three directions, well water and river water, do not interfere with each other. Ahem, not really. The demon race and the demon race still frequently fight. But they coexist peacefully with us, and rarely invade each other. But if you go out, no matter which direction you go, there will be a place that you have to pass. Wanqingsheng looked at Zhuo with some worry. You have to be careful. Chapter 10:25. Danger? That's not a problem. Zhuo did not take it to heart at all. For him, it was much better to make his position clear, as to whether he was a friend or a foe, than to not be able to distinguish between friends and foes in the Heavenly Spirit Forest. Not to mention that he was too embarrassed to make a move. Zhuo was now bursting with confidence. He felt that even if he was not invincible, he would be hard-pressed to find a worthy opponent. I can also use the sky-shaking gong and the sky thunder mirror. I have two treasures of the Umno Alliance in my hands. Who else? Who else dares to make trouble? I still have the Wahuang sword. After this incident, it has recovered a lot of energy. I also have Xiao. After this incident, she has improved greatly and can be a very strong helper. Who else? Who else dares to make trouble? I still have the sword, the hidden weapon, the starry sky everlasting stone, the 99 cat hammer, and the reactivated space of the Tower of Annihilation. Who else? Who else dares to make trouble? Why should I be afraid of the demon clan? Why should I be afraid of the demon clan? As long as they are not big demons, why should I be afraid of small demons? I will kill them with a hammer, and take their inner elixir. The more the better. I will not refuse anyone. I am the Zhongjing Umno Alliance. Even 3 million soldiers could not catch me. Little friend, based on the way you came here, you must have obtained the inheritance of Zhu Wuzhu Rong. It seems that the promise from that day can finally be fulfilled. Wan Minsheng looked at Zhuo again. After a while, he said in a low voice, looking at your cultivation, although you belong to the branch of heavenly fire Qi Yang, with the combination of yin and yang, and the protection of soft water, Your bones do not belong to the branch of real fire of Zhurong. Your body is much weaker. This is a little strange and puzzling. He sized Zhou Xiaoduo up and said with a frown. Moreover, your current cultivation is only at the core formation stage and the nascent soul stage. You're about to enter the soul formation stage and return to the void stage. Although your advancement isn't slow based on your age, it's really difficult to say that it has anything to do with the inheritance of the Zhurong Grand Shaman. The reason for this is like a mess that can't be solved. Senior, you have a great eye. You can see the big picture with one glance. Everything you see is right. You are really good. Upon hearing this, Zhou Xiaoduo became more and more respectful. This Wanqing Sheng was truly extraordinary. It was not surprising for him to be able to see through Zhou Xiaoduo's cultivation with just a glance. But to be able to see through his cultivation method, the level of his cultivation method, and even the source of his cultivation method so clearly. This was the first time Zhou Xiaoduo had met someone with such eyesight. At a glance, it was so clear that one could see the bottom, and from a small detail, one could see the whole picture. What kind of cultivation and vision did he need to have? Well, without experience, this old man should be the most inexperienced cultivator in the world. However, the more this was the case, the more it proved that this old man was a great cultivator, a super great cultivator. Wan Minxing smiled faintly and said, Little friend, have you forgotten that one of my missions in life is to wait for the arrival of the successor of Zhuwu Zhurong? Even if I am honest, the primordial fire of Zhurong raged in my body for hundreds of years, before I finally took it out and settled it down. How can I not have a deep impression of it? In terms of understanding of the primordial fire of Zhurong, even if Zhuwu Zhurong came back to life, he might not be able to understand it better than me. Zhou Xiaoduo smiled bitterly. But even so, in the entire world up until now, I've only met Senior who can see it so clearly. Wan Minxing smiled more and more indifferently. After all, this kind of thing was too common for him. It was not enough to reach the apex. Even if he was praised, he would feel that the other party was too ignorant. Was such a small thing worth flattering? What he was concerned about was another situation. Little friend, you came to this place and inherited the heavenly beam of light. Naturally, it is Zhuwu Zhurong's method. This is not enough to reach the apex, but it is reasonable. What makes me surprised, or rather interested, is that you clearly do not have any traces of Zhuwu Zhurong's inheritance in your body. You are also not of the Wu people's bloodline. You are a pure-blooded human. Wan Minxing said. This is the main reason why I am having second thoughts. Zhou Xiaoduo was stunned. What did he mean? Could it be that he was not going to pass the inheritance to me? Did he want to take it for himself? Well, what did this old man say just now? Even if Zhuwu Zhurong came back to life, he might not be able to understand the primordial fire of Zhurong better than him. Could it be that he wanted to replace him and become another fire god, the sovereign of all flames and flames? It couldn't be. But I really did receive Zhuwu Zhurong's inheritance. Zhou Xiaoduo felt a little wronged. Of course, before I was thrown here, I really didn't know where I was going. This old man believes in that. Wan Minxing had a benevolent expression. I am not doubting you, but you really have nothing to do with Zhuwu Zhurong. I have a space ring here, which was given to me by Zhurong, ancestor of sorcery, in the inheritance palace. Can this prove it? Zhou Xiaoduo took out the space ring of Zhurong, ancestor of sorcery. The space ring does not prove anything. The so-called Zhuwu's inheritance is only what you said. It is not enough to prove it. Wan Minxing was very insistent. What I want to see is the Zhurong primordial fire. He sighed and said, Let me say something to you. The primordial fire given to me by Zhuwu Zhurong is right here. There is no harm in giving it to you. But you must know that if you don't cultivate the Zhurong primordial fire, whether you can take it away is secondary. Once you come into contact with the primordial fire, you will inevitably burn yourself. You must not think that you can take in the primordial fire of Zhurong, just because you cultivate a fire-type cultivation method. The primordial fire of Zhurong is the essence of all flames and flames. Even the demon emperor's grandson primordial fire is inferior in purity. I am not making things difficult for you. And I am not exaggerating. It is the truth. Shuo was stunned. Then what should I do? Wan Minxing did not answer. This was not a question that he should be thinking about. If Shuo could not deal with it on his own, then they were not fated. He could only give him a few reminders. It was impossible for him to give more advice. Then I can stay here for a few days, right? In these few days, I will cultivate the cultivation method that Zhu Wu Zhu Rong passed on to me. I have successfully cultivated the Zhu Rong primordial fire. This does not violate the agreement between you and Zhu Wu, does it? Shuo did not give up and asked. Haha, of course you can. Wan Minxing smiled meaningfully and said. However, Zhu Wu Zhu Rong's cultivation method is not that easy to learn. My young friend, you have to be careful. You must not be rash. Once the primordial fire backfires, even I will not be able to save you. These words were said in an extremely polite and tactful manner. However, the hidden meaning in his words was that he was not optimistic about Shuo's ability to cultivate the Zhu Rong primordial fire. Who was Zhu Wu Zhu Rong? He was the universally recognized god of fire, the leader of all flames and flames. He was an invincible expert in the world, except for a very few people. His cultivation method naturally had its own uniqueness. How could it be something that just anyone could cultivate? You want to cultivate to the point where you can even fuse the essence of the Zhu Rong primordial fire that originated from Zhu Rong after staying here for a few days? I just don't know if this young man is the only one in this world who is so thick-skinned, or if everyone in the world is like this. There is no need to be humble and self-confident. I will wait and see. Anyway, when I accepted your request, I have my own mission and corresponding restrictions. If you do not meet the requirements, I will not give it to you. Senior, where do you think I should stay? Shuo's eyes flashed with a sneaky look. Although the Tower of Annihilation had been reactivated, he would not use it if he could. It was never a bad thing to keep a trump card. Just here. Wan Minxing smiled and waved his hand. Then, Shuo saw that the courtyard had suddenly more than doubled in size. In an open space, for vines suddenly grew rapidly. In an instant, lush greenery covered the courtyard and green light flashed intermittently. The vines grew rapidly and slowly thickened. Then they constructed and grew on their own into a greenhouse. The four walls and the roof quietly took shape. Then in the house, not only did the tender green leaves grow into a bed, there were also tables and chairs. Everything was complete. At the door, well, a door decorated with many fresh flowers opened with a push and closed with ease. It was seamless. This is really a wonder of nature. It's amazing. Shuo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. With just a few vines, he could actually get whatever he wanted. It was simply too miraculous. It's just a few rui vines. Wan Minxing did not care. If you like it, I will give you some seeds of the rui vines when you leave. Thank you, thank you. I like it so much. I dare not refuse an elder's gift. Thank you, thank you. Shuo was so happy that he could not close his mouth. This thing could be said to be the best choice for a family trip. You should rest. The old man smiled faintly. Then he looked outside and said, I have guests. Guests? Shuo was a little dazed when he heard this. You're alone in this endless forest, surrounded by giants. Where did the guests come from? Could it be that those giants came to visit you? Although he was curious, Shuo knew the principle of speaking too deeply with a new friend. He automatically walked into the vine room and looked outside through the window. The rui vines really did as he wished. They grew vines on the window, leaving only a small gap for him to see outside. However, if one looked in from outside, they would not be able to see him at all. Then he heard a very strange voice from outside. Is Elder Wan here? Little Peng is here to visit Elder Wan. The voice was unusually sharp, as if it was squeezed out from the throat. What made Shuo more concerned was that the voice contained a hint of demonic aura. Then another voice sounded. Elder Wan, Little Devil 19 is here to visit. Chapter 1026. Wan Minqing said warmly, "Come in." Following his voice, the wall of vines and flowers outside automatically parted to form a door, and the two of them entered. Well, let's say there were two people. One of the guys was about 3 meters tall. He was wearing a pair of jeans from who knows where. There was a hole in the jeans, and it looked a little damp. He wore a well-ironed suit, paired with a snow-white shirt tucked into his belt, and a bright red tie. He didn't look very elegant. Instead, he looked a little out of place, and was a little silly. However, the most eye-catching thing about this person was that behind his two arms, there were two extremely large wings. Just like that, it walked in, dragging its two wings on the ground just like a rooster that had just lost a battle. But this person held his head high and his chest out. He didn't look like he lost a battle at all. Looking at its face, it had a pointy oval head with black hair all over its face. It had a pair of sinister and unruly eyes, a hooked nose, and a mouth that was as sharp as a woodpecker's. It also had two furry ears on each side of its head. His head was like an owl, his wings were like a big eagle, and his legs, well, he could be considered a human. He almost forgot to mention that this guy was actually wearing a pair of shiny leather shoes. They were definitely specially made for him, because the leather shoes were like two small boats. No matter if it was a human or Wu people, they wouldn't have such big feet. As for the other one, he was completely black from head to toe. He didn't have any clothes on his body, only a body of black fur. However, it already covered everything, leaving behind a pure color. There was a curved horn on its head, and it actually had 5 eyes. When it blinked, the 5 eyes flashed continuously, like 5 searchlights sweeping back and forth. At this moment, this person's 5 eyes were blinking as they looked at the clothes of the guy with the wings next to him. There was actually some envy in his expression. It seemed that the other party's clothes were very high-end and classy. "I don't have anything. I'm ashamed." He had a sense of inferiority like a pauper meeting a millionaire. But he still tried his best to put on a self-esteem of "I'm proud of being poor. I'm proud of being poor, you're rich. But I won't eat a single grain of rice from your family." Under such gazes, the man in a suit with wings became even more arrogant, complacent, and high-spirited. "Four-eared Rock, are you in charge of the demon race this year?" The old man, Wan Minqing, sat down leisurely and asked the man in the suit. Yes, Elder Wan. I have a name now, Rock Four-eared. I'm not called Four-eared Rock anymore." Rock Four-eared smiled flatteringly, but he still couldn't help showing off his new name. He glanced at Emo Sergio, who was standing beside him. "Country bumpkin, do you have a name?" "Demon? Emo Sergio? Just your name. Hee, you really make me Rock Four-eared Rock." Inside, Swishaoduo almost laughed out loud. "Four-eared Rock? It's not as good as Four-eared Rock. What's more, what's the difference?" "Alright, Rock Four-eared." Wan Minqing's temper was very good. Swishaoduo had verified this. He actually praised him. "Rock Four-eared, your name is very good." Then he looked him up and down and said, "Your outfit is also very good." Rock Four-eared became more and more complacent. He tidied his suit, straightened his clothes, and straightened his tie. His face was full of pride as he said, "The other day, I went to the Wu people's city and heard them say that this is the most popular thing now. So I bought a few hundred sets of each. I was supposed to have a hat, but my head is too pointy, so I can't wear it." As he spoke, he took out a hat from his ring and put it on his head. It was actually a white hat on its pointy head. It looked like a bony mushroom with a drooping lid. He sighed and put it down again. "Unless I change my head. But if I change it, no one in the demon spirit forest will recognize me. A group of children will think of me as a fat sheep and want to eat it. Damn it." Emo Sergio, who was standing at the side, was not happy and said, "Roxy Air, I'm very envious that you have a new name. You can go to a human city and dress up so beautifully. I'm also very envious. Your clothes are indeed very cool. I'm also very envious. But there is one thing you need to understand. This is the demon spirit forest, not the demon spirit forest." Rock Four-eared turned his head. His eyes suddenly became fierce. "What qualifications do you demons have to put the word demon in front of the demon spirit forest? Do you deserve it? Do you demons deserve it?" Emo Sergio was not to be outdone. Do you demons have the qualifications? Last time, we clearly came to an agreement. If we want a name for this forest, it will be called the Demon Spirit Forest. Rock Forward was furious. Clearly, it was called the Demon Spirit Forest. You demons are not willing to give up. You actually want to be ranked in front of us demons. Not only are you delusional, you have no sense of shame. Back in the day, when the two demon emperors united the world, you demons were just a low-level race. You could only be slaves. We beat you when we wanted to beat you when we wanted. Emo Sergio was unable to restrain his anger. You also said it was back in the day. How many years ago was that? At that time, your ancestor's 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 ancestor was just an unhatched egg. Can't you stop talking about it every time? Do you have any shame? Rock Forward was still full of glory. These are the glorious deeds of my ancestor. If I forget, then I forget my roots. If I keep talking about it, then I am a filial son. Back in the day, my ancestor, Lord Rock Forward, followed the two demon emperors. He fought against the heavens and fought against the earth. He made immortal contributions and was worshipped as the demon master. Emo Sergio sneered. How come I heard that the rock demon master later betrayed the demon emperor? No, it should be that he betrayed the demon race. Fuck you. Rock Forward jumped up, as if his sore spot had been poked. He cursed. What good things do you demons think you are? In the end, your demon ancestor was still. Emo Sergio was also furious. That's fate. That's fate, you know? Divine power is not as good as fate. Haven't you heard of this saying? Emo Sergio's words seemed to make sense, but anyone could hear the bitterness in his words. No, I only know that your ancestor was defeated by my ancestor, and you are also defeated by me. That's it. Rock Forward was getting more and more aggressive. The two of them quarreled more and more fiercely. Whoosh! Rock Forward took out his demon head saber, his eyes flashing fiercely. Pfft! Emo Sergio also took out his mace and gritted his teeth. Just as the demon and the demon were about to fight to the death, Meng Qi suddenly stopped. I'm going to kill you, you demon brat. See if I don't kill you, you demon brat. Zhuo tried his best to control himself, so that he wouldn't burst out laughing. These two fellows were really too amusing. Could they be doing a crosstalk? Ahem. Just as the two demons were about to fight, Wan Minxing finally coughed and said in a slightly displeased tone, Are you going to fight in my place? Emo Sergio and Rock Forward's expressions changed. They rubbed their hands and laughed awkwardly. In the blink of an eye, his ferocious expression had turned into one that was harmless to both humans and animals. Haha, we're just bickering. Rock Forward put his demon head saber back under his suit. It's fine. Arguing every day is good for the body and mind. Emo Sergio put his mace back into his spatial ring. But when he saw that Rock Forward did not put away his demon head saber, he took out his mace and carried it on his back. 1. It was convenient to use, and 2. It was to guard against accidents. Tell me, what are you doing here? Wan Minxing saw the actions of these two idiots and felt helpless. However, he was really good at maintaining his composure. At the same time, he also had a good temper and self-restraint, so he felt that the current situation was rather cheerful. I was ordered by the boss to deliver some demon cloud water to you, Elder Wan, Rock Forward said. I was also ordered by the boss to deliver some demon cloud water to you, Elder Wan, Emo Sergio said. Wan Minxing said kindly. Then put the things down and go back quickly. Help me thank your bosses. The two fellows happily took out a large bucket of water from their rings. Each bucket weighed a few hundred caddies, and placed them in the courtyard. Then the two began to dawdle again, looking at each other with daggers in their eyes. What they meant was, why aren't you leaving? Clearly, they both had something to do. What is it? Spit it out. Wan Minxing asked. Ahem. Rock Forward coughed. Ahem. Emo Sergio also coughed. They glared at each other, but no one was willing to speak first. Why aren't you leaving? Aren't you done with your business? Rock Forward was furious, and finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Why aren't you leaving? Are you still not done with your business? Emo Sergio retorted coldly. That's enough. If you have something to say, say it all together, Wan Minxing said with a smile. He didn't seem offended in the slightest. As an astral, he was watching a beasts and a demon bicker, like an old man watching his grandchildren bicker. His temper was quite good. It's like this. Fourth Rock glared at Emo Sergio and said, "Our boss wants to ask Elder Juan for instructions." Today, there was the power of extreme flame true fire in the sky. It crossed the border and fell here. Cough cough. Is the ancient prophecy coming true? Is. Really? Ahem. Is it that our ancestors are about to return? Boss said that the ancient prophecy about Zuwu's true fire is. That. Whether or not our ancestors are going to. Rock Four Ears desperately wanted to speak clearly, but he was getting more and more confused. He stuttered as he asked in confusion. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.